Yes, we are, Mayor.
Roll tape.
Mayor Holtzclaw,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Vignell.
Nope, we got to start the meeting first. We're not quite to roll call.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Okay, I will call the September 27th, 2022 regular meeting of the Mill Creek City Council to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and going down the line, I'll ask Councilmember Eckler to lead us in the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we get to do roll call.
Second time around. Mayor Holtzclaw,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vignell,
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Allison,
Here.
Councilmember Duque,
Here.
and Councilmember Paddock.
Present.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll begin with audience communication. Would anyone like to address the council? I'll start in the chambers. If there's no one in chambers, I'll move online. Anyone like to, and there's Barb's hand. Or Barb, name, address in 3 minutes, please. Go ahead. She's trying to figure out her sister's computer. No, it's on her end.
Asa, can you unmute Barb?
There you go. Maybe.
No, we can't hear you.
Barb, if you check your audio settings, there's a little mic on the left-hand side.
I fixed it. She should be able to do it now.
Nope.
Yeah. If you check your mic and you click on the little caret there, and then it has a list of where your microphone is, and it should be your laptop or whatever device you're using. What you can do, you can test your audio settings, and then maybe possibly at the end of the meeting, you can comment then. Is that okay? I'm sorry. Or you can call in if you have.
Try it one more time.
Yeah, I don't think, yeah, we still can't hear you, Barb. Yeah, so with that mic, hit the audio settings while the meeting's going on, so you could test your settings on your device there. Okay, and then we'll get back to you at the end.
Hello.
Oh, we hear you.
Oh, okay. You can
Oh,
hear me?
there we go. Great.
We can hear you.
Okay. Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place Southeast Mill Creek. Thank you. Thank you for your help. I wish to compliment Jody and Scott on the great job with the city chat last Wednesday. The attendance by the Kosher residents was very good to see. Nice touch with the raffle for prizes that Scott and Jody had worked out. It was especially nice to see the city manager there too. So I wish to say thank you to Jody and Scott for a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone else like to address the council? Okay, there'll be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. We'll move right into our presentations. Jody, you're gonna cover the Philippine Consular Outreach Mission and events.
Put them all in there together. And Asa, thank you, Asa. It's gonna run that for me. Next slide. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members for having us here today, I always feel like Scott's with me in all of this because it's truly a partnership when we work on these events. And thank you, city manager, for allowing us to present today. First, we're going to talk about Run with Heart, which is this weekend. Scott has been collaborating really closely with Columbia Athletic Club and Hope Creek Charitable Foundation on this project. So if you would like to run or walk in this event, you can still sign up as long as you get there by 8 a.m. this Saturday. It's at the McCollum Park and Ride. So if you just enter in off 128th, you'll see all the tents and everything there to sign up or just go support. And again, the proceeds for this benefit Hope Creek Charitable Foundation. You can donate. There's a QR code up there if you want to donate in somebody's name. And I know that Scott's put a lot of time and effort into this, and he's actually participating. And I think we have a couple of other people on staff participating, maybe, from what I've heard. All right, next slide, Asa. Coffee with a Cop. So we're excited about this. It's the second one this year. And it's going to be, this time it'll be at Bequest Coffee in Mill Creek Town Center, Saturday, October 5th. Begins at 8:30 a.m. and goes to 11. So your opportunity to meet with our wonderful Mill Creek Police Department. And they're very excited about it too. And we'll be posting some on social media about this as well. And hopefully Scott will be there capturing the great video that he did last year. That was really fun and got a lot of engagement on that. Yes. No, sorry. Wednesday. Oh, thank you for catching that. I see that. It is October 5th. I think we actually did have it, and I will verify that on our calendar, which we did just update. We merged our calendars from the tourism site and our website, got rid of the tourism site one and consolidate everything on our main website, which has been something that we've wanted to do for a long time. So hopefully there'll be less confusion about when events are, and everybody can just have that one point to look towards. And I'll fix that. Thank you. I'll make sure that's correct on the website too a little later on. So, all right, next slide. This is an exciting opportunity for us. So the Philippine Consular Outreach Mission is coming. It'll be here at City Hall North from October 7th to October 11th. This we were contacted by let me get her name right. Ellen Abalera, and she contacted Councilmember Duque and also was working with Senator Lovick to reach out. Apparently, we've had this mission here on site back in 2018. And they helped over 1,000 families or 1,000 people with either passport or dual citizenship issues that they were having for the Philippine community. So we have opened up one of the rooms at City Hall North. So they'll be parking over at City Hall North. There will be a little bit of disruption there. So we're going to have some signage and cars moved to different areas. We will have a VIP meet and greet that will be here in council chambers the night that they first start setting up, which is Thursday, the 6th, October 6th. And hopefully you've all received your VIP invitations. If not, let us know. We'll get that to you. And that's an opportunity for the consular outreach team and the VIPs and dignitaries that they've been working with to meet all of you. And they're very thankful to have this opportunity to be here. It's a pretty big group. They expect to have 1,400 people come through for this one. So, and it's all by appointment only. So it's very, it'll be handled carefully. And there may also be a food truck next door. You might notice that. So that'll be exciting. And we'll definitely post about that and let everybody know. All right, next slide, Asa. We have our community document shredding event coming up. Saturday, October 22nd, again, City Hall North parking lot. A little bit of disruption for some of the classes that we have over there. So some of the folks will be parking over here at City Hall South. And we'll make sure that there's signage and that the folks across the way are alerted so that just in case there's any overlap of people. And it's similar to before. However, we are working with LeMay this year. So it's not called the shredded event. It's called the document shredding event. So just in case you're wondering about that, not quite as catchy, but still should be a great event. So, and next slide. We're very excited about our Halloween trunk or treat this year. We're bringing back trunk or treat, so it's not the candy caravan. We are working with Venture Church and using their parking lot. So it's going to be on Monday, October 31st, 6 to 8 p.m. We'll be setting up probably beginning about 3 p.m. Asa, can you go to the next slide on this one? Thank you. It shows the map. So they have a very large parking lot. There will be parking at Mill Creek Elementary School. I've already worked out that with them. And you'll see the yellow lines on this map to the left of where the parking lot is. They actually have made in the past, last year, they made a lighted path. So folks will have a path to walk over to the school, and they'll have Key Club members and Yabs there to help making sure people can get back and forth carefully. And then they're expecting, or we're hoping for maybe 45 cars this year. They only had about 30 last year, but we think that we can boost that number and get a lot more people out. Asa, can you go to the next slide? And the city is going to have a special presence at this one. We are hoping to use the PW14 truck, the black box off the back, and decorate it with a Jurassic Park theme and kind of have like a thing that they have to go inside. So our Yabs are so excited about this. They can't wait. We're hoping to have a dinosaur and all that. So we hope to have you come out and support this activity. Next slide. We're also very excited about our Veterans Day events this year. So first, the ceremony similar to last year. We do have the Mill Creek Corral scheduled. We have our bugler George Moffett and our wonderful Nick Lewis as our chaplain who will be speaking. We don't have all of the other details worked out, but we're very close on that. So we'll have the ceremony that begins at 9 a.m. and then go on to the other events, which one is the VIP event in between the ceremony and the parade. And you should have also received an invitation for that, but we'll make sure you get more details on that. Next slide, please. And then we have our parade, and we're super excited about the parade and the fact that we did just Mayor Holtzclaw was at City Chat and invited our new Grand Marshal, who's a retired World War II Navy aviator, Lieutenant Commander Russ Hoop. He's 101 and quite amazing. We're excited about him. We just found out that his dream is to have to ride in a sidecar. So our committee is working diligently now to find a sidecar for him to ride in. So we're so excited about
Contact
that.
Dave Summers, the county executive.
Really?
I think he has one.
Goodness, amazing. Okay. We will have to work less hard now. So that's great. I will do Dave Summers. Great. So everything is going well, and we did just hear from JBLM, and we do have our second band. So now we're good in the band category, and we're working on everything else. We have lots of amazing cars already, folks that want to be involved. So we're excited. Next slide. We are still working on our Festival of Trees and Shop Local project. So now we have the Mill Creek Town Center Association and Kiwanis and our A&B board who all want to be involved. So we're excited about that. We did have to kind of look at ways that we could scale this project just because of how big it could get. And I think originally we were thinking we wanted the whole city involved, which we still do someday, but we're thinking that we're going to work at this in kind of a probably like a 3-year plan. So first year, getting all the retailers on board and doing something that unites us in a way, like maybe everyone has similar signage or similar things on their windows that unite everything. And then hopefully in a year or so, look at ways that we can do it with lighting and lighting up the city, which would be really fun. And then also then bringing in the community with their homes getting involved in decorating. So we are still working on that. We're working right now to get all the committees united in this front, but everybody's excited about it. So more to come on that. And then finally, we're excited to have the Santa Parade back this year. That is through Town Center, and that's the Mill Creek Town Center Association runs that. And we'll be doing the tree lighting in conjunction with that here at City Hall, in front of City Hall South. So of course, this is a ways away, but all of this is in the planning because it takes a lot to plan all these. So that's it. Any questions? No. All right. Thank
job.
you.
We're busy fall. Are you gonna be stepping right back up to do the Arts and Beautification Board? Yeah, you gonna do the introduction?
Yes, we're very happy to have Jean Smart, the Vice Chair of the Arts and Beautification Board, here on Zoom tonight to give the presentation for the utility box project that they've been working hard on. So take it away, Jean. And Asa is going to run the presentation on that.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Asa, thank you for running the slides for me. I hope that, I know that several of you have a history with our Arts and Beautifications utility box wrap project. We've been very successful in the past. We started covering what are somewhat gray and blah utility boxes with art from the community. In 2016 was the first time that we brought the project to you. Since that time, we have completed 2 boxes. One at the corner of Mill Creek. Well, we did 3 boxes on Mill Creek Street. I always think of them as installations rather than counting the boxes. So we have an installation there near City Hall that was completed by a commercial artist in the community. And we have another one that was installed that was completed. The art pieces were completed by Jackson High School students in Kaya Smith's class. And so those were completed on our first year. On our last year, we brought another request to you to complete 2 additional sites. And so what we did last year was engage the students at Mill Creek Elementary to contribute art for 35th Avenue Southeast and 148th, right near the school. We had wonderful participation at Mill Creek Elementary, thanks to their staff and their PTA. And in addition to that, we worked with April Musselman at Heatherwood Middle School, and she is the art teacher there, and she completed one for us there. I think we need to move forward with the slides. There we go. These were the first boxes by the artist on the left, and on the right, that was Jackson High School. All right, so move ahead, please. Sorry, I should have told you that. They were well received. So this is last year's project. You can see that the boxes on the left were completed by April Musselman students in an after-school class. Students volunteered to show up and submit their artwork. And I visited the class a couple of times and they were hugely engaged. On the right, you see a postcard with the work that was completed by the Mill Creek Elementary School participants last year. We had more than 50, 60 submissions. Some were not totally complete because they were done by very young children. Others were completed, and this postcard was one that was developed by the PTA following that project. But I hope that you've seen all of these pieces of art as you've traveled through our community. It's amazing to me that I sort of have to point out these contributions to people when I'm talking with them. Because maybe sometimes people don't look left and right, but you can see that these are a huge improvement over what were sort of gray and unsightly boxes. And because these projects have been so well received by the community, the Arts and Beautification Board is coming to you with a request for one additional box project to be completed this year at the corner of 132nd Avenue Southeast and 25th Drive Southeast. We've secured the interest of 2 senior citizen communities to submit art for the project. The City of Mill Creek Senior Center, Activities Director Celeste Lowe has agreed to help us with this project. They have an art watercolor class that happens on Wednesday mornings, and they have 10 participants there. Also, Kosher Senior Living Community has agreed to help us with this project. So we're kind of going from elementary school from high school to elementary to middle school, and now to our senior community to seek these contributions. And Kosher's activity director right now is figuring out how they can help us with this project. You see the site at 25th and 132nd. There are 2 boxes to be covered there. And we're hoping that once the installation is complete, because it would be our own senior center people that will be contributing art, that we would also recognize the senior center, as we did the students at Jackson High School on the installation at Dumas Road and the Bothell Everett Highway. You can see that those are the materials that would be used, final lifespan of 5 to 7 years, graffiti resistant, washable, and they would be installed by Evermark. Okay. These projects have been completed by Evermark after design and selection. We get together as Arts and Beautification Board members and go through every piece of art. Last year were numerous submissions, and we were really happy to have so many participants involved. The estimated cost, because we did not do 25th and 132nd last year. Last year, the estimated cost was $29.45. We are, I think Evermark has done an updated cost, and it would be just under $3,500 to cover the cost of this additional installation at 132nd and 25th Southeast. I think I should mention too that many of our installations in the past have been more focused near the town center and off the Bothell Everett Highway, with the exception of the one at Mill Creek Elementary. And we're thinking that it's time for us to have a look over there at 132nd and grace that community with some art.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Jean.
We're here for your consideration.
Any questions from council, comments? Councilmember Steckler.
If there are no questions, I'd like to make a motion to approve an allocation of up to $3,500 for the Arts and Beautification Board to create this artwork and project to its completion for the senior artwork at the installation site they have at the corner of 25th and I believe it's 132nd.
Second?
Say it affirmatively. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Duque.
Yeah, we can just.
Yes.
I'm thrilled with the location. I am thrilled with the location. I should look this way, which is going to be very awkward. I think it's a fantastic idea, especially because that area seems to have gotten some graffiti. So I think it makes sense and I love this project. I'm just concerned because we're then allocating new money to this for work this year, and wouldn't it make sense to allocate it for, will the work happen this year? I'm confused of where the funding will go, because the last one we went over budget, so there's no money in that line item for our budget right now. And we're trying to, I believe the finance director, or former finance director, our current deputy city manager, in our meetings, we were talking about it needs to be covered. And so I'm curious about starting a new project when we've already met our budget for this year for the Arts and Beautification Board.
I think we have an answer to a question.
So we are $202 over budget in the Arts and Beautification Board. I will say with the ARPA allocation, this could be something that could be covered that we'll go over in our presentation, because we are discussing potential funding for the Arts and Beautification Board, and then they could choose to use that funding if it's approved. But at this time in the budget, we are $202 over budget.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thank you, Mayor. That's what I thought as well. So if this is something that seven of us want to move forward with, and we've been pretty diligent about moving the years forward and getting these boxes covered, it might be a better fit to utilize council contingency fund for this here. And maybe if you would be okay pulling the motion back, it might be a better vessel to get this funded this year. I think that would serve Councilmember Duquesne's questions also.
I don't think you need to pull the motion back. He could amend his motion if he wants to specify the source of funding, because I don't think the original motion specified. We have about 60, even after the 3750 we authorized at the last meeting, we still have 60,000 in the council contingency.
Yes,
And it's is any of that spoken for between now and the end of the year?
it is not.
Yes.
Yes, I was going to, two things. Wanted to answer other Councilmember Duquesne's other question. The project would be completed this year. That was one of the questions you had. Would be completed this year. We did check with the contractor on that. And in my motion, I could make that a little bit clearer when I said I wanted to allocate up to $3,500. I could amend that to say, find the funds from council contingency to allocate up to $3,500, if that would make it a little bit clearer. I was aware that the municipal arts fund had been used up. So I could revise my motion as such to say, I revise my motion to reallocate from council contingency up to $3,500 to complete this project this year for Arts and Beautification vinyl wrap.
Is the Mayor Pro Tem who seconded the motion amendable to that amendment?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yes, I'm still, yeah, that's
Well, we're still in discussion, so
yeah, my question, well, I guess I'm sitting here going through the budget and then wondering, it's already September. Could we not move it into next year's budget and do it at the beginning of the year? Or does it need to be done now?
Councilmember Steckler.
We could easily move this into next year. The fact that the council contingency fund budget does have an overabundance of allocation. It is a possibility of using that over allocation now and get the project done this year. Or we could let that over allocation just go away and review next year with a new allocation for council contingency and the municipal arts fund. But that funding is available this year if we want to take advantage of it and get the final wrap done. It is there is a benefit to as council member Duque brought up, putting this wrap up on that corner of our boundary that is somewhat sometimes forgotten about, and it's nice to put a little, a border up there that does recognize that as a distinction, a corner of Mill Creek and tie it into the rest of Mill Creek where these boxes are. And I think it was a nice opportunity to get that done at this time of the year, and why we thought we would bring it forward to the council, but it's at the council's discretion if they want to move ahead with it or not. The funding is available from another fund. We don't have to use it, but we could. It's really at the council discretion.
Did you have your light on for another comment? I'll turn it off. I was just making sure.
No, just turn it off.
Did you have another comment, Councilmember Duque?
Yes, I drive by this location every day. This is my route. So I think it's wonderful because sometimes, you know, there are areas that we potentially may forget about that are Mill Creek, or you just don't think about when you're in that area. So I'm fully supportive. I just happen to be one of those people that if it's not in the budget listed, then I'd like it to be budgeted for. I'd like us to plan for it before moving forward with anything. But I guess if it seems like the majority would approve to come out of council contingency, I'm happy to support that. But I'm always going to be that person who wonders why we're looking for money somewhere else.
Jean, did you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to say that part of our consideration is the weather. And right after the first of the year, a lot of times the weather is really not conducive to doing the installations. So I think we could take that into account. You don't have to make your decision based on that, but I'm aware that there are times when Evermark tells me we can't install for a while because the boxes can't be so icy cold.
I guess my comment would be, let's not overthink this. I agree, we need to keep our eye on the ball, but we're talking $3,500, not $350,000. So we have the money in the council contingency. That 60,000, if it's not used, is just going to get rolled over and be what we use after January 1st to pay for it. So I haven't heard a good reason not to go forward now. So any other discussion? So there is a motion on the table to move forward with this project with $3,500 from the council contingency fund. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes 7-0. Let's do another box. Thank you, Jean. Thank you for the
Thank
presentation.
you. I'm gonna do you proud.
You always do, Jean.
Thank you.
Okay, why I'm pulling up the agenda again, I think we're on to talk about a farm lease. Is that correct? I'm not sure who I'm turning it over to.
Yes, Mayor. Yeah, this farm lease presentation will have two parts. I'll start off with the lease portion and we'll have our acting chief finish off with the operational plan. So here we have a resolution approving a lease between the farm, the Vintage LP, and also the city of Mill Creek for 639 square feet. Intended to be used as a police substation and potential uses, administration uses going forward into the future. A little bit of background: in 2019, there's an ordinance 2019-849 and contract 2019-1493 that approved a development agreement binding and a binding site plan for the East Gateway Urban Village. This development agreement contained provisions for the city to receive a 50-year lease for space at no cost, no lease cost on that, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. Some of the key lease provisions include, first, the space lease, again, as I mentioned, is the 639 square feet. Currently, the developer is building out the space. It's a ground floor commercial space, which shares a lot of the materials and finishes as the adjoining other spaces within on the ground level throughout the building. The space will be used for any public purposes in the use management or even in operations. And the next piece of that is, which is that last bullet, is that after an 8-year period throughout the agreement, throughout the agreement, the city has an option of assigning or subleasing to a government or nonprofit entity. As I mentioned earlier, the city will not pay any rent over that period of time, but will be responsible for utilities, which will include electricity and heat. Another key piece of that is that we will not pay for any common area expenses either. The substation is the intent for the city. We have some ideas about how we can use this moving forward for administration purposes. In front of the actual substation, we've identified 2 spaces that will be reserved for police vehicles. And with that, I'll hand over to our acting police chief that will cover the benefits and the actual details, floor plan, parking spaces, and how we're going to actually use this space. Chief.
Thank you, City Manager. Thank you, Council, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm actually really excited to be here tonight because this is a long time coming. The city had this great opportunity to partner with the Vintage, and I'm hoping that we move forward with this. The department is very excited about the possibilities here. If you could go to the next slide, A side, I appreciate it. So the very first thing we're looking at here is a police presence, right? So we have the opportunity here in City Hall to serve the greater, this geographically being located to the west side of the city. Most of our communities coming all the way over to the west side to meet with us. This gives us an opportunity to have a police presence on the east side of the city, where the community can come and join officers, meet with officers. Officers can collect statements, discuss issues with community. This allows us to have that engagement on the east side as well as the west side. It allows us to have officers stay more towards their geographical beat areas, so they have a quicker response to those areas, but still having the opportunity to go back to a safe place for them to do their report writing, to gather materials and things of that nature. But having that presence there at the farm, I think is going to be a great thing for us to have. The ability to, the officer presence, I'm worried about this hum, it's rather distracting. So officer presence, and it's on my radio, I don't believe. Officer presence has been identified as, you know, a key deterrent of crime. And this is an opportunity for us to increase that officer presence in the farm location. So next slide, Asa. Again, public safety, additional steps towards another, we bring into our guiding principles, you know, guiding principles that state in public safety that we want to have a safe, healthy community. And so reaching back towards those guiding principles and what the council has established, this fits right in line with providing those opportunities. Again, areas with substations have reported significant reductions in burglary and auto theft and just crime in general. It covers so much more than just that, malicious mischief and things of those natures. Having officers' cars parked out front, having officers in the area, it's going to be a deterrent for criminal activity. Next slide, please. And in regards to service, I talked a little bit about those. You know, this is an opportunity for officers to meet with individuals out on the east side of the city. We're going to have a space there that officers can meet with individuals in the lobby, gather statements from them. They could come and bring in any concerns that they have. This is an opportunity for that community engagement that we want to have. It's going to build the public trust in the police department. So having that opportunity not to have to travel all the way back here to the west side of the city, for individuals in the community not having to travel all the way down here from the farm or even further out on 132nd. The availability of having an officer meet someplace out there. As you know, development is big out there. We have a lot of apartment complexes that are coming, a lot of townhomes, a lot of residents coming into the area, and having them have the ability to meet an officer closer to home rather than coming all the way over to the west side and to City Hall is an opportunity for us and the community. And next slide, Asa. So with that in mind, we've made some mock-ups of what this opportunity might look like for us. Working with one of our graphic designers that helps us with our patrol vehicles. We did some renditions of give the council some examples of what we're looking at. Obviously, it's going to be difficult to staff this full-time. We have limited staff, so we are going to make sure that it is understood that we have limited availability, but we're going to staff it as much as possible. We have an operations plan that is outlined in your packet, I believe, that describes how we're going to accomplish that. That being said, this is a mock-up of what the front of it might look like. Next slide, please. This is the actual floor plan. This allows for 2 desks in an officer work area, a small lobby for the officers to meet with people, from the community that come in and talk with us. It allows for a reception area and a small kitchenette so that officers can maybe have their lunch there closer to their assigned beat areas while they're doing their paperwork and other things. Also includes a restroom for them to use that is not all the way, they don't have to drive all the way back to the city hall for that. And next slide, please. As the city manager indicated, we did procure 2 spaces for parking for police vehicles. Those will be police parking only, which allows us to have immediate access to the building and be able to respond to our vehicles if we need to leave the facility and go to a call that's in progress. And next slide, please, Asa. So the financial commitment, and these are estimates because we just don't know what the cost, the pure cost of what it will be to purchase furniture for this facility. But we're estimating the cost to be about $23,500 for startup furniture, IT, hardware, phones, signage, supplies, those types of things. And then around $5,000 for annual facility fees, janitorial services, security services, things of that nature, alarm system. And next slide, that will take any questions.
Councilmember Cavalier, followed by Councilmember Steckler.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation, Chief. This is a long time coming. This is, I think, 7 or 8 years in the making. So I'm excited to support this. The opportunities are really endless here when you think about it. Just having a presence up there is at Vintage is something we've always envisioned. And now that the farm is there, I mean, we thought of this on a much smaller scale at the time. And now that the farm is there, all these businesses continue to move in, all these renters continue to move in. I think it's a win-win for the public out there. And when it comes to staffing the area, I think this is a great opportunity for our volunteers, for partnerships with the seniors at the senior center. I think the opportunities are endless here. So I love this outreach. I love having a footprint up there. I think many members of the council were here when we kind of plotted this idea. And so it's nice to see it come to fruition, and good job, everybody, all the way around. Thank you.
Hey, Chief, I have a couple questions. So we have a reality of today of our staffing limitations, and that always will not be the case forever. Eventually, we're going to get staffed up and we're going to have a different situation in the future. So I was kind of curious. I agree. I remember this my first year on council when we talked about putting this, this satellite station there. And there was different discussion back then because the situation was different about providing services out there, like being able to purchase permits, pay fines, that kind of thing. Other types of services that would be available, maybe even passports, but other things that could become available. Now we don't really have the staff to staff it. So the proposal you're stating here is, given our current situation, there's 2 officers that would be out there that would be there during their shifts, and unless they're out on a call, they will be in the building, right, in the office, correct?
Well, the idea is that it's a combination of patrolling the area as well as being available at the substation. So when they're available at the substation, that substation will be open. We're also going to utilize the police support officer as an individual who can help us with this facility. And so they'll spend a portion of their time here at the city hall and then a portion of their time out at the substation. As Councilmember Cavalieri also said, that we do have citizen patrol, which is a volunteering group that might be able to assist us with that as well. So we do plan on staffing it as much as possible. We are in a better situation than we were last year, where we now have just the 2 vacancies in the commission staff, outside of the administrative staff. So we are catching up to our staffing expectations. So I think that we'll be better off then.
I guess my question is, I support the substation, love it, support it. I really like to support officers out on the street as opposed to in the substation. And so in the future, I know we'll have the staff to be in the substation, so the officers don't need to be in there. In the short term, is there any chance we would have any type of administrative help or such currently in our staff that could provide the support in the substation so the officers could be more in the street than in the substation?
That would be our support officer and our citizen patrol.
Okay, so that's your administrative support that
As
could be in
for,
there
for right now, yes.
for right now.
Yeah.
Okay, but in the future, maybe that'll be different when your staff is larger and hopefully.
That's the intention. And not only are we looking at police staff, but we're looking at other opportunities throughout the city that might be able to help us there as well. So I think passports was mentioned. That is something that we could discuss in the future. But this is an opportunity to get into this lease now and be able to move forward and have this vision that we've had for many years come to fruition and provide this service to the community out there at the farm. So I think the addition of the substation, adding the police presence as much as we possibly can, has nothing but benefit to the city.
So I wholeheartedly support this with the caveat that I would want the administrative staff there as much as possible, keeping the police amount of time in the substation at a minimum so that they're out on the street, because I could just hear possible comments about this. Why are our police in a substation and not out on the street?
No, patrol officers are out on the road for a reason.
I know you say that too.
yeah.
You believe that. I know
Yeah,
that.
but that being said, we can't, as the slides also indicates, we can't do it from the police car alone. We
Right.
have to also have the ability to have that engagement. And officers in a patrol car driving the beats, they don't necessarily have the same amount of engagement possibilities as individuals that are readily available to the public to just stop by and say hello. So.
Well said.
Councilmember Duque.
I think this is a fantastic investment for the city. And I thank you and I thank everyone involved for continuing to work on this. I remember when I first heard about it, but when I wasn't on council, and I'm very excited for this. I just was curious to share. I think it would be, I don't know what the opportunities are like, but if it's not normal office hours for when it's staffed. So here it's 9 to 5. And so if over there it was maybe evening hours or afternoon hours, I'm trying to think of different ideas or things that this doesn't offer that would be special for over there, or if it's weekend, or if there's something to look at that way in terms of off hours. Because I think that would potentially just, benefit residents overall, because then they know there's somewhere they could go.
And I'm very open to that. I think that as we grow and expand and we have the opportunity in the next budget to maybe think more dynamically and get a plan together. This was kind of a thank goodness we have this availability still for this lease, because that was in question as well. So I think we can plan for that, but I just think we have to, we're projecting them down the road.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. This is maybe just more of a technical question for city staff. Do we need to even execute a new agreement? I thought we did an amended agreement about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago with Vintage so I'm just, is this motion necessary, or did we already handle that?
I don't believe we handled the actual lease agreement. It may have been the development agreement possibly. So yes, we do need this agreement.
And the
Yeah.
section on the first page of the agenda report has the language from the development agreement that contemplates there would be a lease for the space that's executed. I see Jen would like to make a comment. Jen?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jen Van Grippen with Vintage Housing on behalf of the developer. And one, I just want to thank you guys and your consideration for this. We are pleased to be a partner with the city of Mill Creek and the police department to be able to bring a safe location for officers to conduct their business. As far as the agreement goes, yeah, we had the development agreement. This originally, as you guys recall, was at the Vintage at Mill Creek, the senior location, where we had a substation called out, and as the city was working through their progression, that didn't come to fruition and that went to the senior center. So at this point now, we have this location that does need a lease executed for the substation. And we are just, again, pleased to be able to do this build out and provide this to the city, as I think it's a huge benefit for all.
City manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I apologize, Jen. I did forget to mention that Jen Vangerpen is the Director of Development over at Vintage Housing. And so she's been instrumental in the liaison and helping us get to this point with the lease agreement, as well as with Acting Chief White in nailing down the improvements, the TIs that are taking place right now. Also, want to thank our city attorney and their team in putting this lease agreement together. This was approved by the Vintage Housing legal team as well as ours. And so it is a review document. And also our acting chief too. We were at a point where we weren't sure what we were going to do with this, and Acting Chief White actually figuratively pulled the trigger on this and got us moving forward on this. So thank you, Chief.
Councilmember Ellison? Is your mic on?
Before we get to the motion, I'm just wondering, do we already have budget allocated? And utilities and that sort of thing going forward as well?
So we do not have budget allocated at this point in time. It really depends on when these expenses start coming in, and then we have discussed how we'll be covering that. If it will be ARPA funding, if it will be something that comes partially out of the police department, partially out of finance, depending on which direction we go.
Do we have a wag of what those utilities are going to cost?
5K.
Some of the utilities come with the space.
No, it does.
As I recall, the majority of the cost is set up, right? The equipment, desks, walls, build out. So we're covering the build out of the space, right?
Right.
Right. So wouldn't that be capitalized? That wouldn't be that'd be a capitalized expense?
So that could come out of the 316 capital fund.
Right.
You are correct.
That's what I thought of.
It just wasn't on the budget. So that would be something we would have to work through.
But that would not be a problem. Chief could cover the $5,000 in utilities himself.
Other comments, questions?
Sorry, this is Jen again. I was just going to speak to, I know that budgets are a concern, and obviously we're in the middle of budget season for 2023, as we are still working to develop the space and are in for permits now, actually. So we're waiting on our permit review. We are not looking at opening the space until early 2023 to allow time for your guys' budget to accommodate the startup costs.
There you go. Answers that question.
Mayor, on that basis, I'd love to make a motion. I move to approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a lease with the Farm by Vintage for municipal office, police substation, and administrative uses.
Would Councilmember Duque like to second that?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Chief.
I think she meant to turn it off. I don't think it has been on for a while. Okay, this brings us to one of the main events, although I'm not sure I see a bag of popcorn with them, but
Gonna miss having you at the head.
I will try and bring them back at least once or twice a year, just for the sake of it, because they won't get any use any other way. Thank you very much, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. I believe Asa is going to pull up my presentation. With your permission, I'd like to take just a few minutes to kind of talk through some basic slides at the beginning of this, and then I'll return to my desk over there so you don't have to see me try and shuffle all the paperwork up here. But my purpose in coming tonight is this is the first of 2 study sessions that I wanted to schedule for the engineering services project program, which is essentially one of the primary feeders of the capital improvement plan, of the compliance with the capital facilities plan, and the development update of the transportation improvement plan. And I'm going to ask, is Asa able to bring up my presentation?
Frank, if you could stand by, it looks like that Asa lost her connection. I'm going to pull it up for you.
Do you need some assistance in finding it, Naomi?
I'm going to get it right now.
So what I would like to do tonight, just to give you some introductory comments while Naomi's helping me here, is I have not allocated a 6-year plan just yet. That is my plan for the October 11th council meeting when I return for the second study sessions. What I wanted to bring first was a comprehensive ledger of that has been kind of the fruits of my labor here these last few months, shaking the trees, trying to find all the projects that have been sitting out there for years, either on our CIP or in somebody's notebook somewhere, or in somebody's idea plan. I also was pursuing the various opportunities that have come in the way of infrastructure planning, transportation planning, and follow-up projects that the federal government has opened up programs, at least in the short term, and wanted to put together a strategic plan that really better positioned us for chasing after some of those opportunities that would be of specific benefit to us here in Mill Creek. And so a lot of that has been, if you go to the next slide, please, has been what has fed this particular thing. So a couple things that I want to talk about tonight, getting back on track here, is I want to quickly review a couple concepts that the city council has already seen me present on in the past. Again, I'm trying to keep some continuity from the concepts I introduced last year to this current process here. In particular, I want to talk about how did we get from where we are today in terms of developing the project scopes and estimates and what projects are on the ledger. I want to talk very briefly about the current content draft that was provided to all of you. And then I want to open it up for as much time as council is willing to give me tonight, bearing in mind that unfortunately I'm not the only study session on your agenda, and try and capture as many comments, questions, feedback that you might have in relation to the completeness of the ledger. Did we capture everything? Did we miss anything? And as we're starting to then shift towards the next study session and looking at prioritization, are there particular projects that council members want to either strongly support or not strongly support, so we can get some guidance on that point? So next slide, please. So again, basic idea for project development that I've been following. These were originally introduced by Director Mike Todd a couple years ago, and I've kind of continued to use that particular structure. We have 4 stages. We start with the concept stage, which is basic idea. It's usually not much more than a paragraph that somebody has given us saying, wouldn't it be nice if X? And then we develop that concept a bit more. We vet it a little bit. Is it an idea that works with Mill Creek? Is it a crazy pie in the sky idea? What level are we talking about? And then we move on to the scoping stage. Scoping stage is where we actually put some meat on this in terms of planning a project. So we will flesh out the concept into a description. We will start looking at funding opportunities. We will develop a preliminary estimate that captures the cost of it. And we will work towards getting it integrated with the capital improvement plan, either at this stage of the game that we're at today, or if we're not at this stage of the game, some sort of capital improvement update, maybe in a mid-biennium period. Design stage, and then Director Todd often reminds me that I need to clarify what I mean by design. When I'm talking about design, I'm not just talking about your project drawings, your engineer drawings. I'm talking about the whole delivery aspect of a project. So your geotech reports, your environmental studies, maybe your preliminary surveying, those are all kind of your traffic studies, especially traffic safety studies. Those are all part of your design stage of your project. Usually when the design stage of the project happens, that's when we have actually formally started the development of the project because we're working straight to the construction stage at that point. Next slide, please. So this is my complicated flow chart that I kind of follow when I start with an idea that's on the preliminary list and I run it through the left side of that flow chart, which is mostly the concept side. As I described to you earlier, you have a project that either stays on the concept side, gets discarded, or moves on to the scoping stage. And then we move into scoping stage, which is a more detailed, involved process. As you can see with the green dot, that's kind of where we are today with this current process as part of this 6-year plan and my stakeholder consultation with council that's always a part of that process. Next slide, please. So the new version of the project plan, it identifies the projects that we have on our ledger right now, and that's what we'll be discussing tonight. The next version of this will be the recommended programmed plan for 23-28. The current ledger has about $62 million worth of projects on it right now. There's no actual intention that we're going to be able to deliver $62 million worth of capital work or engineering work in the next 6 years. So we are going to have to sharpen our pencils and bring a recommendation to you that is a deliverable or a realistic appraisal of those. It looks at city policies and priorities as a whole, including the feedback that you're going to give me this evening. And it looks at our 2 speed limits that are going to apply to this year's 6-year plan. One of those speed limits is the one that we are more accustomed to addressing, which is the availability of funding. How much can we spend from certain funding sources on certain types of projects? A speed limit that at least is going to be a challenge for us in these first 2 years is the one that's already been spoken to earlier in the evening, which is staff resources for reliable delivery. I think I should emphasize that. We are still working on building out our engineering staff at the city. We have certainly encountered the same challenges in fleshing out our own engineering staff that the whole region is experiencing right now in terms of hiring qualified licensed engineers and/or experienced engineers that can deliver our projects. We are still working on that, but that will necessarily have to inform at least my recommendations that we'll bring in 23 and possibly to a certain extent 24 as we make certain that we program something that is reliably deliverable. So we do spread over a 6-year period. Of course, as you're aware, only the first 2 years of that 6-year period represents a decision where we will eventually bring it as part of the overall budget package for council approval later this year. But the 6-year plan remains the 6-year plan. It has its, even if we're not funding the years 3 through 6, it's important to have projects represented on the 6-year plan because that forms, for instance, the city commitment to those sorts of projects that helps us then chase external funding opportunities or other similar opportunities. Next slide, please. And so with that, and with your permission, I'd like to return to my desk and open the questions. And what I've done is, as I presented to you in your cover letter that Naomi assisted me with last week, I tried to pose 3 kind of, I guess you would call them steering questions that I recommended, just to try and be helpful as far as what sorts of comments and questions and concerns that I wanted to reach out to all of you tonight about. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. When I'm going through our binder, there are a lot of things that we're moving around, and then we're saying that it's being reallocate funding will be returned to the funding source, which will then be reallocated to funding other projects. So I'm confused by what we mean by that.
Okay.
So one of the things that I tried to represent in your binder was taking a look at the previous CIP, the 21-26 CIP, and essentially giving you a postmortem on where we are with that, because some of those projects moved forward, some of them didn't, some of them were finished and just there's money left in the pot, so to speak. And some of them sat on our CIP for a few years, and so needed to be rescoped and whatnot. So what I was trying to do is give you a couple short sentences about what would happen to the appropriated money. So this council appropriated money for the 21-22 projects in the last CIP. Some projects are going, some projects are not. So whenever there's excess money, I do like to represent to council that that excess money returns to the funding source so that it can be allocated to future projects. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. So are you saying this is money that we have allocated in the budget, or is this money that we had gotten grants for somewhere that we were returning?
For the most part, we are talking about our own money in these conversations. Most of the grant projects, we didn't have a lot of grant projects on the 21-22 ledger. The main grant project that we had was addressed in terms of the Complete Streets project, where we had a Transportation Improvement Board grant. And so unspent money that returned to that funding source. So we repaid the state for the money that we did not use in the completion of that project. The rest of the projects are mostly funded with our funding. There are a few grant funded projects that instead of being discontinued are being rolled forward, and those I gave a new identity as project sheets and whatnot to make clear what they were.
Okay, so basically we're just reallocating in our budget line item where the money.
That's correct. And that's a large measure of what we'll bring during the October 11th council meeting. Is we will kind of whittle it down to the, what are we really doing as far as that goes. I was just mainly trying to clean the books in giving this by giving you a status update on the projects that you had seen on the last CIP, because some of those projects, they did drift. They drift out of a scope that was relevant to the city. Some of them were assigned city funds nonetheless. And some of them, the scope has been folded into updated projects. We just needed to be able to show you that the money that was approved previously for those projects, where it was going.
Okay, perfect. And then my next question, I was curious as I was looking through, have we actually talked to the Parks Board, for instance, on what things they think need to be updated at our certain parks, because they go on a tour every year? And I know, as I saw, you have, we have an unfunded for Nickel Creek Park, for instance, and we were talking about trails in there, but I know like the picnic tables are in bad shape and things like that. So I figure that the Parks Board probably has a list of things that need to be addressed over the next few years.
Agreed. And actually, the ideas that I received from past Parks Board contribution to some of those walks, I tried to incorporate as much as possible. Some of the projects are less loosely scoped than others, just because there are still open-ended. That's part of the prioritization scheme. So some of the projects like Nickel Creek, they've been thrown out as ideas, and so we've given it kind of preliminary scope and whatnot. But I agree, as we further investigate this, I'm certainly open to people either attaching other ideas to it if we can accommodate it and whatnot, or offer the suggestion so that we keep this a living work plan going forward.
Okay, perfect. And then finally, I just have a comment and I'll let somebody else talk. I just want to make sure that as we're going through this process, that we are ensuring that we are leaving enough projects in here that are not funded yet, so that we're ready and available to be making sure we're in line for any funds coming from the county or the state to help fund those projects. So I want to make sure that we're taking care of that when
We are, as I mentioned, we know that our project ledger represents more projects than we could possibly pay for ourselves. There's also a speed limit as far as, at least in the short term, staff. A lot of times you can find the funding for projects, but if you don't have the staff to reliably deliver it, that still remains a challenge for us. And we've seen that challenge here in these last couple of years. That said, by virtue of having this ledger, and the project description sheets that you've seen that don't make it into the 6-year plan will still remain part of the package as projects not programmed during the 6-year period. So we have the opportunity to still adopt those as being, these are projects we couldn't program them in 6 years, but they have already been detailed, they've already been scoped, they've already been preliminary estimated, and all those things position us for greater success in terms of chasing opportunities if the opportunities arise, including identifying what types of opportunities are the most useful to chase.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilmember Duque.
Mine is not large question. It was actually in reference to what Councilmember Vignal shared. I thought when it came to the parks, a lot of the from the Parks and Recreation Board, it's maintenance and not this, right? So what they're working on, what they do is the maintenance, so the playground equipment. This is more the bigger projects, and so I took that into account when looking at this. Took off my experience on like the tours and more focused on kind of, or some of them were like the bigger issues that we kept finding. I'm sorry.
Director Todd.
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly right. The tour yesterday, well, one person showed up. We've got another one tomorrow for the other half of the park. So we hope to have that. But indeed, a lot of it is maintenance kinds of things. But it's also an opportunity for the park board to say, this park only has toys for little kids. Let's think about toys for bigger kids. And that's the kind of thing that would feed into a park. I think a lot of the improvements that are in the Silvercrest Park upgrade came from that kind of visit with the park board a couple of years ago. So that's how you kind of see it migrate through. Thanks.
Not seeing any other lights going off. We'll have a couple questions. How much do we have in traffic mitigation fees sitting in the accounts? I saw, maybe I missed some of them, but I only saw one project that had mitigation fees go towards is about 600,000, which I assume is from the farm.
So right now, we haven't sat down with available revenue
Okay.
sources yet to be able to figure that out. So by and large, I took a preliminary stab at assigning relevant funding to things just to start that. But that was one of the reasons why I left some of the tables out of the packet that will be document exactly that, because that's still a decision that we need to develop your recommendation for October 11th.
Okay. I've been on the council since 14 and I've never seen or heard of the 2013 conformed agreement with WashDOT. Could we get a copy of that or discussion at some point of what that is?
I can, but I'd like to, with your permission, introduce you a little bit to it, because I think the conformed agreement is something that I'm not certain that Public Works did much looking at it in through a engineering projects lens. The conformed agreement is an agreement between WashDOT and cities with relation to state highways that run through those cities. And the conformed agreement is primarily oriented towards divvying up the responsibilities between cities and the state for improvements along those corridors. The responsibilities that are assigned to cities break into two categories: cities below a certain size, below 27,000 people, and cities above that line. So we're clearly below that line. And one of the things that jumped out at me, and the reason why I don't think the conformed agreement was taken into account in previous CIPs, was the proposed projects for capital improvements along the state highways. So the conformed agreement, for instance, assigns capital improvement projects on the state highways to the state, not to us. So that becomes a different approach towards us needing to partner with the state to get these capital improvements that we might desire on 132nd Street or Bothell Everett Highway as part of the state's ledger projects in partnership with us, rather than us pony up the $4 to $6 million per intersection that was on some of those past projects. And so that's why you saw me kind of back away from some of those proposals. They were a bunch of the ones that were listed on the unfunded CIP of the past that I was largely discarding, because some of the things that I did put on our ledger was to look at our needs, look at how we view 132nd as a city street as well as a state highway so that we can position ourselves to work with WashDOT in accordance with the conformed agreement.
Okay, that's helpful. And
Thank you.
the last question is, am I reading the proposal correctly that you're proposing a more proactive approach with ADA compliant?
Yes.
And why?
For a couple of reasons. One is because ADA in general is getting more expensive as time has gone on, as they add guidelines, and we have somewhere that we need to keep up with as well. And so I'm trying to expand at least the question marks so that we know we can project a year or two or more in advance what sorts of repair projects or ADA upgrade projects that we're looking at. One other key aspect of it is looking at our pavement preservation program, which is one of the things I want to get relaunched. Whenever we do overlay work, we are responsible at that point in time for doing the ADA upgrades, mostly pedestrian ADA upgrades for those overlay streets. I really want to get us ahead of the game on that one so that we are scoping and budgeting for the ADA upgrades so that we can keep the pavement preservation program moving as efficiently as we can fund.
Okay, that makes sense. And that was getting at why I raised the question, is because we've had this discussion in the past, is the triggers, these ADA ramps aren't cheap. And so my concern was if what proactive meant, if that meant we're going to be go out and fixing ramps before we've done the road improvement, only to come back when we overlay the road and then have to redo the ramps again.
So one of the things that you try and do, and this I tried to represent a lot more clearly in the pavement preservation section of your packet than you saw in the past, is I have kind of three main projects that I broke out. I mean, hitherto now you've kind of seen it as a yearly allocation, of pavement preservation, but I broke it out into three different projects. The ceiling project, the overlay project, and what I call the concrete repairs or concrete improvements project. So that concrete improvements project is typically the ADA improvements that chase the overlay project.
Okay. And then my only comment, my only disappointment of otherwise great work was on page 9 when I see the gateway and presence improvement canceled. I think that needs to be, I mean, we heard, actually, that was one of the issues that came up at Coger, was some of the seniors, was the signage around the city, the ability to get around. And I still every day drive down 164th and see the old City Mill Creek sign when we have a brand newer one up at 148th and out at South Everett Highway. So that's where I'd welcome discussion in the coming weeks on putting that back in the plan. Go ahead.
If I could respond to that.
Yeah.
So the reason for that, a lot of times with those sorts of improvements and whatnot, we want to make sure that we're building what we envision and whatnot. The original project became outdated because it was envisioned by people. So I pulled it out of the CIP to give our communications and marketing folks time to actually develop what we want to look like, and then we can put it back. So this is an example. This project here is an example of a project that exists right now as a concept and didn't move forward into the scope project into the ledger you see in front of you, but it is not gone by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, let's just find another way to word it in the document, because canceled has a certain connotation to it.
Understood. Thank you.
So those were my questions. Comments. Great job on all the materials. Others? Oh, I'm sorry, lights have gone off like crazy. I don't see who was first, so I'm gonna go by seniority. Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. My first one is I know I had talked about this with several, with the city manager, getting a wetland study on the other side of Cougar Park and that available park space. I think that's something I'd like to see doing that before we start giving ideas to what we can add to the CIP. So if we can maybe get that moving along or start the process of that, that's something I'd like to see. And the second question is in the transportation section of the packet, pages 26 through about 30 have some astronomical numbers for the sub area in 2027 and 2028. Can we discuss those and talk about that and what's that all about?
So first of all, I wouldn't get attached to where I've timed anything. I was starting to try and spread things out just to see where they occurred, but that doesn't necessarily I wouldn't necessarily take that as a strong endorsement of it. Anything that we do on Mill Creek Boulevard, still has there's a study that needs to happen first, and you'll see it actually programmed sooner than those elements. There's actually two. There's two that happen at the same time. One is a transportation corridor study associated with the surface, and one is associated with the subsurface, with the surface water improvements that might need to support that overall. Those I wanted to program sooner rather than later is because those will inform those two projects that you're now asking about. What I did was to create them so they had an identity in our ledger as kind of the north phase, south phase of each of the stormwater version and the transportation version, so that we knew what we were chasing towards. We were not doing a study just to do a study. We were doing a study to now flesh out further, not just the scope, but also the budget for that, with the idea that the study will be completed in the next biennium. And then when we come to you in 2 years to do the CIP again, then those projects will have a lot more solid in existence, both in terms of funding and in terms of scheduling. So that was the intent of putting them where they are, is really the recognition that the Mill Creek Boulevard improvements is a priority for the city. And so when I was starting to kind of position, especially some of those items that feed off of those studies that I was putting in the first 2 years, I tried to pull sooner rather than later those out of the outer years.
Okay, thank you.
Let me add a little bit to that to put it in context. So let's not get confused about the Mill Creek Boulevard sub-area study that was done by the study group to say that might get wrapped into our consideration for a comp plan and how we handle growth. Even before that happened, remember, we've got an issue with failing stormwater pipes under Mill Creek Boulevard. The pavement is in bad condition. So no matter what we do, those projects for redoing stormwater or that pavement will be in there. What Frank is talking about makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about what the impacts might be if we're going to change that streetscape in any way, shape, or form. We might decide after you guys have gone through, after the council's gone through the comprehensive plan update process, you want to keep it just the way it is. Let's build it back the way it is. We like it with no sidewalk on one side. We like it, that's the interest of the city. Or you may want to make changes. If you want to make those changes, it makes sense to have this preliminary work done so that those things that are out in those out years, 27, 28 would be done to give us the gateway to the city, or different parking arrangements, or whatever it would be. So it's kind of, Frank's done a great job of kind of sequencing these things to make sure we get the studies done first and then the projects later. And you see big numbers in the outer years like we always do, because that means they're undefined or they're actually going to continue beyond the end of the 6-year period.
Thanks for the clarification, both of you. Thank you.
Councilmember Paddock.
I had a couple of questions. One was about the speed limit, if you will. I think that you covered it a little bit in a prior question, but I just wanted to confirm what I heard, which was that this availability of funding and the availability of staff to take on some of these projects, you kind of, to some extent, push these projects out if the state were to step up and offer some funding, or if there was some ARPA funding that we wanted to provide. To some extent, what we see 24 out would be a pick list of things we might choose from should additional funding come in that was unexpected.
So the thing I'd say is that it's twofold to get to your question when we're talking about the state highways. One is a funding question, but also another one is an articulation of city goals and whatnot, which is the reason why, again, you start to see, I introduced, for instance, a study that largely focuses on Mill Creek Boulevard and 164th Street, because you really can't talk about one without talking about the other. But parcel of that study is if we change our usage of Mill Creek Boulevard, for instance, redoing it with a somewhat different cityscape, then we're going to change the congestion conditions at the intersection of 164th and Bothell Everett Highway. And so that then, from the study and what we adopt as the city goals and priorities based on that particular study, then gives us the articulation of city policy that we can go to the state, talk about looking at that particular intersection. So that's one example. Another example is you will see on there the 132nd street study. So this is really looking at that whole 2.5 mile length of 132nd Street that borders on our north side. That actually is a little bit, depending on who you ask, they view the street differently. For us, it's a street. For the state, it's a state highway that is not necessarily high on their priority list for care. From the state's perspective, it's not necessarily much of an arterial because the state highway takes a jog north into rural land. But from the county perspective, it's a major arterial because of all the development that has occurred east of the city. So the idea of that study, and this again feeds to that, is to develop the city's priorities based on the traffic conditions and where we think the traffic conditions are go. So we can use that as a stepping stone to engage not just with the state in that case, but also with the county in terms of a mutual future interagency approach to improving that particular corridor for everybody. So yes, it is about chasing the funding, and it is pushed out there because we don't necessarily have the staff at the moment to do that, but it's with the goal, at least an articulated potential goal for the future of what I've just described.
So state representative, county representative comes and says, do you have a shovel-ready project available for X funding?
Yeah, or
There's
even,
a pick
do
list
you
there.
have a future project? Do you have a future anticipation? And what I'd like to do is position us with already policy adopted to be able to say, yes, we do, and here's what we'd like to see, or here's what we'd like to get allocated into the state capital budget for Mill Creek, or here's what we would like to chase in grant opportunities, either from state grant funding sources or even the federal grant funding sources if there's a good suitable one.
Thank you. The other thing, I guess, is this maybe an ask, is what I really appreciated was the clarity and the specificity of the projects, especially looking at this the first time. That was super, super helpful. But what was hard for me to grok was how do we put all of this in context? How would we look at, what has the biggest impact and the largest sense of, or the most significant sense of urgency and the biggest spend? I don't know if you had such a great looking graph on how you made the decisions on all that. I'd love to see some sort of 2x2 that has urgency and impact and then dollar size as the dot.
Okay.
So anything that gets popped up to the far right that's small, good Lord, let's do that immediately. And if it's to the far left and big, let's never talk about it again, kind of thing. That would really, Jody's laughing, so that's made my day, but that would be super helpful, I think, in that exercise you want to go through on the 11th.
When I bring the 11th recommendation, I'll bring kind of a not that flow chart, but an analysis of how we have come to what kind of matrix we used for at least the broad strategic discussion of how we develop that 6-year plan. Because as I mentioned, there's more projects on there than we can squeeze into 6 years. So there's inherently going to be projects that are plugged in wherever they happen to be in your table 1 right now that are going to have to drop out of the 6-year plan. And so what I hope to be able to articulate to you is why we made those choices. Something that feeds into your prioritization scheme is the incremental nature of some of those projects. One project feeds another. So that sometimes defeats matrix approaches to that sort of thing. But at least the tool set that we use, I'll bring so that you can see what tool set I use, just like I kind of brought the example of the flow chart tonight.
Thank you.
Councilmember Steckler.
I've got a few questions, and most of mine come from the summary resolution page. And I'm going back on the same one that Councilman Cavallari brought up, the Mill Creek Boulevard sub-area study. You state here that it is completed, and as we know, it was completed, but it was definitely not in agreement, and there was a lot of confusion on it. And again, I saw the same thing he did, page 26, 27, 28, with like $16 million worth of funds allocated. And I go, how can we have funds allocated against something we don't really know what we're going to do yet? And as I understand your question, your answer to that was, well, whatever we do, we're going to have to fix the streets. We're going to have to fix the pipes, but we're not going to do that until we know what we're going to do with the buildings that are there, because we're not going to be wanting to fix the streets unless we know what we're going to do with the buildings. So it's kind of I assume the 16 million is more than just the streets. It must include the rest of this sub-area development plan as well. And we really don't have one yet.
Let me take a run at that, and see if I can answer your question. So when you look at the sub-area plan as a strategic study, you're right. It is where it went, and I was mainly articulating it from the standpoint of there was a programmed project on the 21-26 CIP that was to have a consultant come in and do the sub-area plan. That is what I'm referring to when I say completed. It's not a reference to the work being done or even the work being complete, itself in terms of future work. It's that programmed project, the way it was scoped and budgeted and at the time, that's what I'm describing. So the next piece of what you're asking about is where the sub-area plan starts to branch from some of these other elements that I'm introducing into the conversation. So as Director Todd mentioned, the sub-area plan kind of moves next into the greater, broader conversation of the comp plan and looking at the growth patterns and what are we going to do with that? Is the Mill Creek Boulevard sub-area going to play into that conversation? Is it not going to play into that conversation? Those are what I understand to be still discussions to have. In the meantime, just to finish that, what I'm recognizing is whatever we do with that, we have a street that's really kind of a gateway street to our town center from the south. We have a project that's going to come, the construction for the bus rapid transit route down 164th is going to come next year. And so regardless of the sub area study and what it recommends or not, we have a street that we have an opportunity to take a look at, decide what we to do with it. In the short term, I've introduced the two studies to advance that conversation in parallel with these others. Does that answer your question, sir?
Well, actually, yeah, I wanted to get a clarification that we have a Mill Creek Boulevard sub area study that was not agreed upon, but
That
we
is
agree
not
we're
true.
going to.
That is not,
I'm sorry, sir, I have the floor. We have a sub area, you can talk about me after I'm done. Sub area plan that there's still some disagreement on, that we're not in full consensus, which you were not given a complete plan saying this is what we're going to do. But we do need to put some money against it because we're going to do something there. And so you have put some allocation of sums of about $16 million against it. Okay. So that I understand. What we don't have is a clear-cut direction of what we're going to do yet. But your job is to make sure there's some funds there. And then now that the funds are there, we need to actually come up with a more articulated and clearly agreed upon plan of what we want to do with the Mill Creek Boulevard. So I think that's what I wanted was a little clarity here, because we were kind of going down the road that what we have is just the allocation of what we're going to do for pipes and sidewalks, but that's not really true. You're putting some money against the ability to do something with Mill Creek Boulevard, but we still aren't quite sure what we're going to do with Mill Creek Boulevard yet. And we're going to get there. So
If I may, one of the reasons I mentioned that is that I haven't put any of those $16 million that you're referring to in the first 2 years of the current work plan. And I'm kind of doing that deliberately because I understand there's still conversation, there's still discussion. I'm not really wanting to force that, but I am wanting to make sure that we've looked at the corridor, we've looked at the stormwater system in the first 2 years, in these next 2 years, so that as we move forward with our overall picture and whatnot, we're not playing catch up. I'm not certain I would ever propose, unless council advised me to do so, that we were going to race quicker than we wanted to go on this corridor.
okay. So that was my point, was I wanted to make sure we were talking. My second question was the citywide traffic signal upgrade project continuing has been rolled into the 23-28 plan. The question I had on that one is cameras part of that project? And I wasn't sure if it was a question that came up in another meeting I was in.
Could you repeat that? I'm
Is
sorry.
cameras part of the citywide traffic signal upgrade project? Cameras.
Is that the $14,000 one?
it's the second one
Yes,
on.
it is.
Yeah, so this was the ITS system, the integrated traffic control system that was done
Keep the signals
by the county.
connected.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's our small piece of this multi-million-dollar project that the county's running. So $14,000 is our piece of it.
that's also, cameras are not included.
You
I would
use
think you could.
cameras to look at where cars are waiting, or you use loops in the pavement. And so that's, with respect to that, yeah, there's cameras used to detect.
To
where
detect
cars
the
are.
waiting levels, but that's all. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all. Not what I thought. Okay. I'm just trying to move along. The Spine Road, I see it's ongoing but changed. It is not canceled, it's changed, but you're going to bring that to council because we have not seen that yet.
So you actually have that. I'm sorry, one of the things that I changed in there, and I feared I would confuse people. You will find it as the 133rd Street Extension Project in your packet. I have proposed a different idea. And I haven't tried to push this forward as a commitment. One of the problems that we ran into that project is that the actual development patterns of the East Gateway moved faster than we were. So we ended up with a short street section of 133rd Street that is very hard to deal with as a full multimodal corridor, particularly from a stormwater standpoint. We've kind of painted ourselves into a hole, and what it turned into, the last estimate that was done by the engineers that were working on it, basically raised a project that was far too expensive for the benefit that the city was getting out of it for a full multimodal street. So I proposed an alternative with the 133rd street extension, which was to look at a non-motorized version of it, one that still built a pedestrian bicycle connection, but didn't try and build a pollution generating street.
And since you will be bringing that though to council, you don't have to talk about it now. You'll bring it before we approve
Yeah,
it.
you will find.
That's all I
that-
want to know.
you'll
Okay,
find
we're
the
not moving
project
ahead with it.
descrip-
Okay.
find the project description.
That's all I
in
wanted to know
ROA.
because it sounded like it was already moving. Great. I want to keep going.
Sure.
Silvercrest Park, that was going to be done. It didn't get done, but you are going to keep the grant. There's no grant loss at all possible
Absolutely, the
on that.
project is
Great.
ongoing.
Park restroom, shelter roof replacement project. Did the Heron Park, I didn't see it as part of this. Did it already get its roof replacement done?
Heron, when it was redone. a
It
couple
did,
years
it
ago,
did
yeah.
get done. Thank you. Just want to confirm that. And then the Dobson Remler, it's probably my fault. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find any dollars allocated for any kind of money for Dobson Remler. And I know we allocated dollars for the sub area project. So I assume there'd be dollars allocated for Dobson Remler, but I didn't see any in there.
And there are, but that project is actually going to start to grow legs on us. So I'm going to direct you to a couple different projects. So first of all, we have the master plan that is going on right now. So that's what is currently allocated. That master plan is going to start informing us about what sorts of improvements we need to do both for the DRCC area as well as the surrounding street and stormwater improvements. So I did put in North Crest Drive pedestrian improvements project and North Crest Drive stormwater associated, and I said in the description, it's associated with the DRCC. You will also find in the park projects on the outside right now, a DRCC phase 1. That is a placeholder project for what I envision as the first phase of construction recommended by the master plan.
So all of these are in the parks projects, the
So
Dobson Remlers.
they are each one that I listed, the pedestrian project that I mentioned, North Creek pedestrian, you will find that in the non-motorized section of the transportation section.
It's in
The
transportation.
stormwater improvements you'll find in the stormwater utility or surface water utility section. And the DRCC phase 1, you will find in the park section.
Okay.
As we start to do some of these larger, more complex projects like the DRCC, they are going to start to grow legs of a lot of different types.
Okay, my last question here, page 8. Historical preservation project could just be a mistake in the verbiage here, but it says project was completed, excess funds will be returned to the funding source. Were there any excess funds? Because that's one of the reasons why the municipal arts fund was over budget.
In honesty, that I guess I would say that that's my standard language.
Okay, then I'm not gonna worry about it. Yeah, there probably wasn't. Okay, great. That's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Duque.
So I just want to confirm, we're just going free for all, any page that we had questions on when it's our time. Okay, perfect. So I was following along with the objective questions. for the study session that you had. You know, are there any projects you found missing from the total ledger of engineering services group projects? I was surprised that there aren't more things happening on the other side of 35th. To Seattle Hill Road. I saw there were projects that had to do with Seattle Hill Road up until 35th. I know that there's changes then, of course, because it's county, Seattle Hill Road up that way, but it was, you know, I found the project you were talking about, I think you referred to as the 133rd expansion. The Spine Road is the way I think of it. That's on that side. There's the general conversation about 132nd, but it just seems like there was a lot of focus when it came to Pipestone one. It's just, it felt like there was a lot in this area. And so I just wanted, in case that hadn't been thought through, or if there is anything along there. And also, I assume with the 35th crosswalk, because you have to do studies, that those studies would then maybe inform us on traffic, like, you know, on other things. So then we don't need its own 35th study. But that's just what I flagged for things that I found kind of missing in the project.
So your assessment is generally correct. To be honest with you, when I kind of shook all the trees, I didn't find a lot of projects up in the northeast corner. And what also reduces the possibilities in the northeast corner is that Seattle Hill Road is a county road at that point rather than ours. So a lot of these sorts of conditions that normally generate city capital projects or city engineering services projects, you don't have a lot of major streets up there necessarily generating those. You don't necessarily have a lot. That isn't to say that that you're not going to find elements of that geographical area in some of these projects, whether you're talking about the ongoing aging and failing infrastructure program, the comprehensive pavement preservation program, which allocates to various years the streets that'll be done on those. 35th in particular. So the one major project that has been on there has been that crosswalk location to provide additional crossing. We also are kicking back off the traffic count studies that we've done in past years. 35th is the subject of that. We do need more information about that street. I did not put a 35th Avenue corridor study on the 6-year plan ledger yet, mainly because I had already put quite a few on there. And so I had to draw the speed limit somewhere, so to speak. But in time, I think that that's going to be the subject of more focus as we ourselves start looking at some strategic planning related to the wetland complex and the Thomas Lake area, as well as just that corridor itself. It's a long, straight corridor that has concerns. So I don't see that corridor going away, but that's why you don't see a lot of projects in general out there.
And that's what I assumed, because it looked so, I thought this was really helpful, you know, just being able to go through. It was great reading each page and kind of figuring out the Mill Creek sub area. I had lots of questions about why it was worded that way, but I'll move on because that was already discussed. But yeah, it was that, and then in the mitigation area, south of the farm, those were things that I thought, oh, I wonder, and it's sometimes the language, because if maybe we assume it's already being taken care of or it's part of these other projects, but people who live over on east of 35th to Seattle Hill Road, they don't always feel included already with the city. So I think it's really important that, I mean, if there's no work there, then there's not, but being able to flag in those opportunities, I think is really big. And I think you had a question, so.
Well, no, let's be fair. I mean, the county just rebuilt Seattle Hill Road from 35th
Oh, it
out
looks
to
great.
132nd.
Yeah.
And we just rebuilt the floating bridge, got rid of the floating bridge on 35th. And the county just invested and has done the whole 35th corridor, expanded it to 3 lanes from 132nd all the way down to, so we haven't ignored we may not have had any specific projects, but there's been a lot of investment of public dollars in that side of the city.
Absolutely. And thank you for raising that. And I absolutely agree. That's why I assumed it wasn't there. But I was it was more one of those things when I thought, oh, there are roads, you know, within that whole area. And what were the considerations? But yes.
Isn't on the 35th crosswalk, isn't one of the timing issues, don't we have a provision in the development agreement with the farm that they have to do some kind of traffic counts on the 35th corridor, so we get a handle on the traffic impacts before we decide what or what we may do with the traffic mitigation fees we have from the farm to put in some crosswalks. So there's a timing issue in that too.
Yeah, so you really want to have that mitigation area open and people using it.
Right.
To give you enough justification to put a crosswalk, because right now there's no justification for it.
Well,
Traffic.
I will, yeah, for driving potentially, but for those of us who live on this side so there's two parts that I would potentially push back, and maybe not large impact, but in terms of people walking, there are residents who now go over to the farm for purchasing, but then there's also the residents behind the farm who use the Albertsons and who do use that walkway that's currently closed. So there is flow between the two areas, and there is walking, but I want to put my hat back on for Parks and Recreation Board. The idea of being able to connect your parks to make them accessible, bicycling, walking, and right there, Buffalo Park is just so isolated. And so then that is a connection. If you go through down the neighborhood, down the steps, down the neighborhood, through, through Bluegrass Meadows, across the way, but that is a connection that takes you Exploration Park. And I happen to be one of those families in Mill Creek that was redistricted out to Penny Creek from Mill Creek Elementary. So there are those of us that are in that area that now, instead of going south to the school walking, we do have to go across 35th and then across 132nd to go to elementary school. So maybe not traffic like motor vehicles, although I would disagree because I'm stuck trying to make a left out of there any day. But it's more of that walkability. And that's what I really liked about that spine road.
One thing I will share with you on the 35th Crosswalk project. So there are 3 intersection candidates for that particular project. It's not an anticipation to build a crosswalk at all 3 of them. We've got to look at which of them is the safest to approach that. But we also, there is an engagement process that needs to happen as a result of that project. We need to look at which of those 3 intersections from a walkability standpoint is going to give us the most benefit for that. That is built into that project. That's the reason why that project references all 3 of those intersections as candidates without articulating that we're going to definitely do this one or that one.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on that, I think we all agree there's a need, and I wouldn't even mind seeing it sped up a little bit. I think we had 2 fatalities and 2 other collisions within a 3-month span in that area. And I think it's a 1.2 mile stretch where they don't have any passage for safely getting pedestrians across the street. So I think we all agree that there's a need there. So I would kind of echo Councilmember Duquesne's sentiments on that regarding the crosswalk. I think it's important.
Councilmember Duque, do you have more?
I do, but I'm happy to let
go ahead.
others go.
Go ahead.
Okay. So that was transportation. And that was the first question, which was, are there any projects you found missing from the total ledger? Do you have any questions about proposed project sheets? Oh, I do. Oh, surface water would be the category. So I'm looking for my highlighted. I saw a lot about inspecting public. And I don't see it here, so maybe it's not part of this, but inspections of private, is that just a different? And I know, and I'm sorry, and to clarify, I don't mean inspections to private because they have to do their own inspections. I understand that, currently dealing with that in my own thing, but there's in my personal, in my HOA's conversations, there's things where they say that the city, does come out to check to make sure we're certain things so that we don't get violations. So I was curious, there's nothing here, so it's a separate area, not part of this conversation, right?
I can answer that very briefly with your permission. So first of all, what most of the projects that you see are things where ultimately I'm going to be coming to council, bringing a contract.
Okay.
Whenever we're doing stuff with city staff, that's largely absorbed by the price of having city staff. So a lot of that coordination, whether it's working with HOAs like yours to develop the inspection protocols and whatnot, or paying the periodic visits ourselves just to make sure that compliance is happening, that's a staff function rather than really a project per se. The project is called out because the catch basin inspection, the annual inspection, I've just kind of folded in with it, but the catch basin inspection was introduced in the 2019-24 ecology permit as every 2 years you have to inspect every single catch basin in the city, and we are actually anticipating bringing that contract to you for your review next week or the next meeting. to try and accomplish the current requirement by August of next year, which is to hopefully get a consultant out looking in our 4,400 some odd catch basins between now and next year. But what I want to do, because that is such a big lift and it is significant, that is the reason why you've seen me cut it out as a project ongoing, because we expect that requirement's not going to go away. It's always going to be a recurring whatever, and it's a high enough expense item that I wanted to make sure it was visible.
Thank you for that one. Also with surface water utility, there was the storm pipe rehabilitation work plan update. It's like on page 79. It talked about that the cameras, what was taken and then it became out of date. Was that the reason why we didn't end up using that data? Because now we have to get new photos. Is it because there just wasn't staff allocated at the time to be able to get that work done?
So storm pipes are dynamic environments. They
Okay.
constantly change over time. So the camera data that was used to build the grade C pipe repair program that you're all familiar with dates from 2012 to 2017. So we are in 2022 now. So unfortunately, that means that as we work through one work plan, we have to start developing the next work plan to keep the cycle going. And so the project that you see there is the development of that work plan to replace the 2017 one that we prepared that has kind of fed the program to date to keep the program going. That will include some updated cameraing protocols so that we can do a little bit better about diligently having a shorter time frame to our camera, so we're not so strung out over 5 years worth of camera data and whatnot. So we're going to apply some lesson learned from the current program when we develop the work plan for the next program.
Thank you. I have two more. Now I'm in facilities. It is the entryway ADA upgrades for City Hall and the library floor repair. I mean, huge library. I use it all the time. I walk on that squeaky floor all the time. Did we end up not getting, there was a council
I'll
meeting?
cover it in my report.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Mayor. I'll pause on that. And so then I think my last one is page 106, City Hall North building renovation. Oh, this is in regards to, I made this note because do you have any feedback on projects that you may either strongly support or reluctant to support? There's obviously a lot of updating that needs to happen to City Hall North. I'm familiar, I used the building before COVID. I completely understand and respect that. But I just wanted to flag, when we update, City Hall North, I think it should be open and used by all residents. And so maybe with all of the projects that are happening, I don't know. I personally feel like I don't think with the money investment put in, it should be leased out as much as that maybe it currently is. And I just wanted to state that as one of the things that I support, obviously, that it needs to be updated, but it would be supporting it because it's going to be used by residents, organizations, clubs, recreational programs, staff, and whatever that might be. And those are my questions. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I had to wait, so I'm going back. I just wanted to reiterate with what Councilmember Duque was saying regarding the crosswalks at 35th and the walkers really needing that crosswalk. And when I was out doorbelling last year in that whole area in North Point, all the way down, that was what the number one thing I was hearing everywhere I was going doorbelling was that they're crossing the street. It's dangerous. They need a crosswalk. So I think for that area of the town, they really desperately need a crosswalk to get across because it's so busy there and they are crossing over. And it was the number one thing that I heard in that area. So I just want to jump in and add that on there.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Councilmember Allison.
Yeah, I just want to second that. That was not just in that northern or that eastern part of the city either. It was people like over in the parks, more toward the south end of our city that bike over to the farm now. And now there's even more businesses there. So there is a lot more traffic, foot and bicycles than you would think. A lot of people would appreciate the crosswalk there.
Councilmember Steckler.
I went back over, took your advice and looked up the the numbers for Dobson Remlo Church properties. And I see the two study numbers that you put in there, and that's great. My concern is to me, one of the most exciting things facing our city is this opportunity with the Dobson Remlo Church properties. And I noticed the 16 million we're putting against the Boulevard project. I think we should be putting some money into the development of the Dobson Church properties. And we don't have any of that in your budget, any big type of development funds. I think we should be looking at that. I mean, as you say, they're placeholders at best, but if we don't start putting some money in there, I don't think we're ever going to see that be a reality for the next, 6 years. So I think we should start putting some money in there.
Okay, thank you.
Let the record reflect, he said he has one more. That's what we're
I do just have one more. And so when you said the word placeholder now, it just went off in my head. I noticed that when it comes to the public workshop, we have it, looks like the placeholder is 27, 28. I think our needs were a little more dire. And it's my understanding we were in deliberations with Silver Lake Water District currently. So whether we can have an update on that or maybe start allocating funds sooner rather than later, if that matters.
Real quick, so the Silver Lake Water District property that was attractive to us a number of years ago is now half the size. So it's less than an acre that's available. So it just isn't big enough. So that's what's happened there. We've not shot that one in the head, but it really, when you look at it, we need space for both a shop, which would fit there, but also the yard of where you put stuff. So you go take a look at Dobson, there's a lot of space used up with salt and sand storage and where we empty our dumpsters. And so really the reality is it's shrunk over time. So that's why if Frank just kind of stuck a number out there, it's going to be a problem. Where do we find a 3-acre parcel in Mill Creek? It may have to be something very creative, like outside of the city limits. So that's what we're stuck with. Thanks.
And one of the reasons why I've kind of carried forward and it really added scope to the value engineering study that we need to do for that is to tease out our requirements for that, kind of update those because our brainstorms before our operations and maintenance activities have grown. We have new equipment, we have new methodologies, new staff needs and whatnot. We need to update that plan so that we know what we're actually looking for, whether we're looking for it in the city or somewhere immediately out the city. And that may include some outside the box thinking like Director Todd was mentioning, which may include multiple locations strategically selected and developed because we just can't get that physical area in one spot.
Mayor, I just have one more, just one more, Mayor. Just one more, Mayor. My blue light is on. I have one more.
Councilmember Steckler.
I'd like to agree with the mayor on one of his comments regarding the entrance signage to our city. That project, it did get kind of rolled into another project, and I do think it would be important to bring it back. And rather than, to coin a phrase from our Director Todd, rather than shoot it in the head, I really think we need to bring it back, give it its own life, a project to recreate the signage into our city. It's old, it's antiquated, it's falling down. We've lost our mill over here across the street. It's now the Ardent,
Yeah,
whatever it
so
is. Yeah, it's time for us to take control and give some signage back to our city. So to put some money into that, it would be a great shot in the arm and a great investment. So I'd rather like to see that back in our budget for the future. So I'd like to, that one comment is to agree with you.
Make another if you agree with me.
That's just, no. I'm gonna quit with that. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? We done for tonight? More to come. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much.
Anyone need a quick break before, how long are we think we're gonna need? I'm just trying to anticipate extending the meeting because we're gonna have a short executive session that should be no more than 10 minutes. Pardon me. And how long do we
Yes, Mayor.
spend on ARPA? Should we extend to 9:30? Let's just extend so we don't have to interrupt the discussion in the middle of it, so.
Mayor, I make a motion to extend the meeting to 9:30.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? Meeting is so extended, the regular meeting is so extended. Okay. Do we address you as deputy city manager / finance director still, or just deputy city manager?
What a pro answer.
All right. So I'm really excited. We have had the ARPA ideas really generating with staff, and we've touched base with council. We've had a outreach survey that we are still just getting through. So I just wanted to go and maybe go at a higher level on where we've been, just because we have a new council member, where we've been, what happened, and then we'll jump into our guiding principles that we've been using to kind of steer our recommendations. So back in March of 2020, that is when COVID was officially a pandemic. We got our first disbursement in June of 2021. So we have $5.8 million that we've been allocated. We currently have spent around 300,000. And so we have 5.5 left. We got the final rule. So before April of 2022, we were in this limbo that was the interim final rule, where they kept saying things would change. They weren't really sure. And then when that final rule came out, they really did change a lot of the hoops that we had to jump through. So they gave us the ability to say, if this is an expense that would normally be something that would be coming out of your general fund, that expense will qualify. So that was just a huge relief. It made it a lot easier for us to make the changes that this city really needs. So from there, we started, I believe it was July of 2022, that we really started pinning down what our priorities were and where we wanted to go. So we started focusing on this theme of rehabilitation and preservation and beautification of the city. And then council made it very clear that they wanted to support our staff. We wanted to retain our employees. And so then in September, we did do the retention incentive, and we got that dispersed on September 16th. So we do have until December of 2024 to spend these funds. Well, we have until December of 2024 to allocate them, and December of 2026 to actually have that money out of our account. Otherwise, we have to give it back. So from there, as staff and council continues to work through community needs and strategic investments that support the community most, we've used the city's guiding principles as a steering mechanism. So if we could just pull that up real quick. We've really pulled into this safe, clean, and well-maintained city that comes from, oh, I don't think anyone's gonna be able to read that. Can we bring it up? So really the one that we've really been pulling from is this community preservation. So while we're pulling all of these together, this has been the one where we're pulling this clean, safe, and well-maintained language. So from here, this was in the packet, so I'm sure you guys have, and most of you have seen this. Let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. All right. So we were just going to go through guiding principles, the development phases that we've been through, where we're at, what the common council priorities were. And then right now we are in that phase 2. And what does that mean? Where are we at during phase 2? Are we all still on the same page? Do we want to start movement into phase 3? And then we're going to have discussion on funding and then priorities and next steps. Okay. Again, this was just the guiding principles, so we can go to the next slide. All right, so up until July, we were really in that phase 1. Let's identify what are these priorities that we can all get behind. And so when we pinned down this theme and we said, hey, we've got this, we came up with the term bucket. We had the retention incentives, and there were a few other pieces that had kind of stuck out that we didn't have. Everyone wasn't wholly communicating this is the top priority. We had a lot of council members that were like, you know, that would be great, bringing in more revenue, but I don't know that this is really how we should be spending this funding. So as we started working through the different priorities, what we wanted these projects to look like, some of this really started just falling into place. And so we've gone ahead and added this because there was a majority of council that supported it. So we thought we'd go ahead and move forward in that phase 2 and start adding those projects and items. And I will say we are not, we're not like stopping any kind of projects or items from coming in if there is additional requests. So that is one thing to remember. So this is just, here are some priorities. Let's get these going. We know that this is going to help the city, so we're going to at least move this forward. Okay, next slide. Okay, so council priorities were mainly the city operations, equipment, the infrastructure, enhancing the capital project. So a lot of them were, you know, sidewalks, the ADA access for the sidewalks, crosswalks, streetscapes, the different parks. What can we do that the public really can feel? So from there, community programs, service development, we're talking about potentially having, I'm not going to say daycare, but the preschool programs. And then based on projects that came up, we could technically move into some kind of daycare-like setting without the red tape that we were running into previously. And then the last one is the completed one for the workforce recovery. That was the retention incentive. Okay. Next slide, please. Yep. All right, so this is just another review. ARPA funding received. We wanted to make sure council priorities and our guiding principles were considered. We've been reviewing these different projects and we're bringing all of these different identified items under this approved structure that we've discussed. So right now we have done that community engagement and outreach, but for that survey, but we do have some other ideas to really get the community involved. So right now we have our theme, that's the revitalization, preservation, and beautification. And then we are looking at the revenue generation that you guys haven't really been, this is not something we discussed previously other than in our individual meetings. And then the workforce recovery bucket is the retention incentives. Okay. All right, so getting into this theme, we're going to start with the theme and then I'm going to go over the revenue generation ideas, and then we'll just look at the completed retention incentive and then we'll move into the discussion. So under the city infrastructure and upgrades, we were talking about the ADA sidewalks, the crosswalk updates. So this will allow us to get more grant funding, and then it makes us a more accessible and walkable city. So it's going to increase that walkability score and help us really move the city forward as far as accessibility for everyone. For the light upgrade, we were looking at the potential of moving all of the sodium bulbs to an LED bulb. So in the long run, that will save us money in utility costs. And in case anyone was wondering, a sodium bulb is a high intensity light bulb that puts out a large amount of light that's needed for the different street lighting. Because I know when I was looking at that, I was like, that looks very odd. So outside of that, we had discussed there's a lot of the different signage around the city that is not always uniform. A lot of our wayfinding signs are, there are lots of different versions. So we had this as a capital improvement project. This is something that would really pull the city together as we look at this rehabilitation and preservation. We really get the city back to where we're used to seeing it before this COVID happened. So we do have the 40th anniversary coming up. And so we were considering doing the different banners that are hanging on the different light posts just to celebrate this end of COVID and the city's birthday and, really getting the community involved again, bringing them out, getting everyone together. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so for the equipment upgrades, we have the council retrofit that everyone is using. And then we were looking at a street sweeper. We're looking at a street sweeper that is larger than the one we have, mainly so that it can speed up the street cleaning process, because the current version that we have, if an employee is driving it and they need to clean up, or if they have a stick in the road, it's not going to pick up that stick. So we're going to potentially look at a larger street sweeper that can pick up the larger items so that your staff isn't having to stop the vehicle, go out, pick up some sticks, and then start again. Another item was the sidewalk shaver. Right now we've been renting those, and that is something that would help us with our sidewalk projects. So it could save money in the future as well. Another thing that I don't know that we've discussed a whole lot is the safety and surveillance video system upgrade. So this was a new one that came out. So with the sports park issues, and then just the level of vandalism that's been happening, we were considering doing an upgrade. And if we just included all of our different video systems all at once, it could save us money going in the future. All right, next slide. Okay, so as far as city operations upgrade, this is another new slide. So the telephone system upgrade is something that we could really use. Our system is extremely outdated and we have been having issues with it. We could save money on long distance as well if we switch over. We have looked at a website and resident communication platform redesign. So that website redesign is going to be really expensive, and it would be really nice if we could have some kind of a communication platform that lets you reach out. You can sign up for texts. So, hey, there's a road closure, there's flooding, or there's something that's happened. We're letting you know. It's just like en masse. We are looking at a Springbrook financial system upgrade, pulling our payroll and HR into Springbrook, at least a part of the HR and then the payroll piece. It will help save money in the long run, and it is a bit easier for staff. And then there will be training that will be involved in that whole process that we've discussed with Springbrook. The other item is laptop purchases. We still do not have enough laptops for all of our employees. We've been trying to purchase them only when we really, really need them. It would be nice to make sure that everyone that can work from home has a laptop. And then these additional expenses that we weren't expecting to have to cover in the general fund, if we could cover potentially part of that, that would be very nice, because IT is currently over budget. So the other items were the city personnel manual and the police policy manual. We're talking about potentially having a contractor come in and look at that, and then having legal review any kind of recommended changes. This is a really large project. And it would be nice, we could speed that up, get that handled, where right now staff is very limited. We're still working through the recovery part of COVID. The last piece is the substation outfitting. This is an option. If we are interested, we could use ARPA funding for all of our startup costs, IT, security, furniture. This does this does pull in with a potential revenue option, and we'll get there here in a moment. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so this was actually something I was really excited about when we started digging in with staff, like what can we do to really get community input? So we have been discussing potential park upgrades, and is there a certain feature that potentially the Parks Board would recommend for all of our different parks. Do they want a slide? Do they want new tables? Do they want a certain type of water fountain? Or would they have a recommendation of, hey, you know, Exploration Park is brand new, so maybe we want to go focus on a different park and we want to really revamp one park. We felt like letting the Parks Board take this and saying, hey, you know, we're thinking about maybe $200,000. Can you give us your recommendations on what you would like to see in the different parks? So from there, it's mainly, we're going to need to discuss with council if that is a priority, if that's something you're interested in, and what kind of amount of money you would like to recommend. So we don't have to approve anything. It's mainly just guidance on, do we support this idea? Do we have a tentative amount we'd like to touch on so that I can work with the board to meet ARPA criteria while also bringing that information that they have for recommendations to the city manager, who will then work through that and we'll put it in the budget. And then I do think it's a good idea. We will have to work through the survey results and maybe discuss those with the Parks Board. And I do know that Communications and Marketing was wanting to discuss that with council later. And I think that was probably going to be closer to the beginning of the year though. Okay, next slide. So along those same lines as the Parks Board, we had decided that there could be a great project or maybe a few different items that would be nice for the Arts Board to go ahead and provide recommendations on. I think we had kind of landed on around 50,000. So we'll get feedback from council on that. And then we'll contact boards if we move forward with this idea.
Laurel, just out of curiosity, do we have like a running tally or dollar figure of the things you've been listing here, or does that come at the end? Or
So we have not, mainly because we wanted to make sure everyone was in support of all of these items. And then that's part of the phase 3.
okay, all right, thank you.
Mainly because if we go and start digging into a project that council has no interest in, we could waste a lot of time. All right, next slide. Okay, so on the community programs and service development, we were discussing the different programs, the before and after school program, preschool programs. The bathroom was the main issue previously, so we are throwing that out there as an option. And then the word daycare is not as scary. From there, recreation and the community programs, we're looking at potentially funding additional events and for 23 and 24, especially with the 40th birthday bash, if we want to call it that. Next slide, please. All right, so this one is I don't know if it's considered a little out of left field. We had slightly touched on some kind of a grant program. We did want to stick with our guiding principles. So we're focusing on this clean, safe, and well-maintained city, getting everything ready for this big celebration, bringing everyone back into the city. So we are looking at potentially having some kind of a cleanup grant. So this would be purely a reimbursement style grant. So, you know, you bring in your receipts, you've put a fresh coat of paint on the exterior front of your building, or, you know, some of the awnings have gotten a bit dirty. And then we have different signage that is not meeting code. So potentially having the option for people to update their signage. This would help both the city and our businesses. So this is one idea. And then our other one was the community preservation grant. So we've had some people that have come onto different homeowners properties, different business properties, and they left a lot of trash, a lot of debris that is now these individual homeowners' problem or these businesses. And they didn't necessarily ask for this. So we are looking at potentially having some kind of a grant program that is, that would cover 100% of the cost to clean these areas up, mainly for community safety. And we are looking at potentially 15,000 maximum per business or property owner, with a cap of potentially 100,000 for the whole program. So, and that's really just a random number. If council would like a different amount, that's fine. Or if there's no interest, that's okay too. If we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so revenue generation, this is stepping out of that theme. And so this is more of an individual bucket. So we are looking at considering a citywide fee study. So this is going to be your building permits, right-of-way fees, animal licensing fees, facility rental fees, franchise fees, that kind of thing. So pretty much anything in the city. We've got a lot of different fees that have not been updated. They're very, very old. And so like, I believe the facilities right now, they have not had their fees increased since around 2019, something like that. So just a general review, and this is something staff could do. It's just going to take a lot more time. And with the short staffing, we're trying to potentially expedite this because it could bring in additional revenue. And the other option was a passport expansion. So this would, at the substation, it would provide the staffing of the building. So we would potentially cover one issue there, and then we'll be bringing in additional revenue. We had done some research. It does look like we were bringing in around $400,000 net in 2018 and 2019 before COVID hit. And we did bring in our highest passport income this last month since the start of COVID, and it's actually the second highest revenue we've ever had in a single month from passports. So kudos to them. If we can go to the next slide. All right, so this one is just the employee retentions incentive. I just wanted everything together. So if anyone was looking at what our different priorities were, this would be included. This was dispersed in September. It was based on how many months the city employees had worked during COVID for the city. And total costs with all of the taxes that we paid was $318,000. Next slide. All right, so from here, I mainly wanted to start getting feedback on just the theme, the revenue. We've got the workforce recovery bucket that we know that everyone's on board with, but then are there other priorities that maybe we missed or that you would like us to add or take off?
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation, Laurel. Thank you. As I was reviewing this list with you, as you were reciting it, I was hoping it would have had a little more pop, like we were purchasing a chunk of land for X, or we were constructing X for Y, or something like that. I understand that laptops need to be purchased. I'm sure the light bulbs certainly need changing and whatnot. I think that's usual maintenance stuff. So I like everything you have up here. I like to find a nice hybrid of really everything. I like the idea of a before school, after school type of BAS program. I always think we were very friendly to families before COVID, and I like that atmosphere here too. And I think it could be a great bonus for employees as well, or a way to entice employees over here. So there's a lot here. I mean, I'm happy to talk about, but I'd like to, I like the idea of maybe some shiny new toys for the citizens that kind of went through hell for the last couple of years. That's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
was, very succinct, very good. Councilmember Duque.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So based off of what you just asked about confirming council alignment, so this is just me going through. For city infrastructure upgrades, I'm very happy that that's where we find the wayfinding signage and all of this. The 40th anniversary banners, I know this is like a very minute thing, but that doesn't seem like something we can then reuse because depending on how long those banners last. So something more that talks about the pride of the city or, you know, art, or, you know, it's something that doesn't date us and then we can't use again or, I think is important. Same thing with when it comes to landscaping, redesign and revitalization. If it comes to anything of the parks, thinking about what can be sustainable, taking a look at, you know, where do people walk through the plants the most, you know, that, you know, not just putting up pretty things that'll then get trampled over time. So, but happy with all of those. City equipment upgrades, those are the things the sidewalk shaver, street sweeper, those are the things that I think are good items to have included with ARPA funding and that in terms of like things that we would purchase and that residents would notice and feel. And then let's see, city operations upgrades. Oh yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with Councilmember Cavallari. This is the part where I went, oh, this is what we're talking about when it comes to this. Cause I thought, you know, with the phrase, you know, community revitalization, preservation and beautification, it just seems like I'm actually one of those people that would be excited for a Springbrook financial system upgrade, but the laptop purchases or, you know, just some of these things, the substation outfitting, I feel like that's a good fit, you know, in terms of what we're using for ARPA. That makes sense to me, but some of the other ones, it's kind of like, oh, I don't know if that, while for ARPA, we're using funds that we would have had to pay during that time if COVID hadn't impacted us, right? Like that's how we all think about it. I just, they didn't see great. And then I loved your park upgrades, the idea of involving the Parks Board for recommendations. I happen to know they have 3 projects ready to go. I'm sure you've heard about it. I think everyone has. I know I talked to you about a couple of them that they absolutely would. So I am concerned, of course, with the funding level because parks things tends to be expensive. And so there still has to be limitations. Because I think there might be a recommendation for a water, you know, a water feature, those kind of things. So potentially like not setting boundaries, but just something to like consider in terms of what's needed, like providing them the guiding vision and goals. Same thing with art and beautification board. I think those are perfect uses of like where, you know, being able to get that involvement and having that creativity and getting them excited for. I'd love to see something that was parks and art combined, something where they'd have to work together on for a project. I think that's something sometimes recreation and parks they're just so separate, and it would be great because these are where we all go as a community are to these parks. And so then the opportunity to see art in that way, I think makes sense. And then, of course, the city cleanup grant, community preservation grant, I had a question for you. And it was, and this might be just kind of crazy and way out there. So along Bothell Everett Highway, there's a whole chunk that has that wall, right? Is it a sound wall or the nice, we don't have that like along 132nd. You just see people's fences that don't get fixed. So I wonder if as part of the community grants or things people do, maybe it's fences that are, that need to be repaired and there's certain like restrictions about the locations that they could be done and it could be coordinated that way. I think of it as from an HOA, there's certain common areas. If there's a fence around a common area, then we'll do, you know, some type of work with them. So I just think if there's in those high visibility traffic areas, that might be good because I think that tends to impact a lot. And the wear and tear, obviously, because you're off of 132nd Bothell Everett Highway. And I'm not being succinct. Yeah, I will pause there because if there's anything else I can follow up with
I
you.
will say I did completely forget to really go into the landscaping idea that we had. So we do have these streetscapes that have been a little unruly. A lot of our medians are in rough shape. We were going to have, potentially have a contractor come in and really put the city where we want to see it, push back, cut back those different trees, the overgrowth, make sure that those stop signs can be seen and that everyone is safe. Also, let's get the medians back in shape, the condition that we're used to seeing. Just all of the different features around the city that maybe could just use some tidying up or some shining.
These are great feedback. I have to say, I read through your plan because we get the documents in advance, and I was going through it and I've had some time to think about all of your ideas. And yeah, it's interesting when you hear Councilman Cavaleri's comments, which I respect. Gosh, we have this huge amount of money. Couldn't we do something really, put it together and do something really great? And that was kind of where I was at in the beginning. But then when I read through all of these ideas, my initial thoughts were a lot of the things that I cared about, the revenue producing items, they're there. And so I said, well, gee, great. Some of the things I really care about are here. And then I started reading further, and things I had never thought of were there. And so I thought, well, things I care about are here and things I'd never thought of are here. And then I thought, as I looked at it a little bit further, I thought, if we did all of these things, if we could do all of these ideas that you have, I don't know if we can afford to do them all, but if we could, wow, that would be a huge impact on our city. Like the stuff you're talking about, once I read it, I started looking around, driving around, and I looked at it, oh, you're right. Our foliage is horrifically overgrown. You can't see the sports park sign if you're going one direction, unless you're on top of it, you'll drive right by it. And just it's into this roads. I looked at the buildings, the businesses, their awnings, their signage, their paint, how dilapidated they are. And I thought, wow, what if you gave them a 50-50 half price to get all their, they can get all this done for half the cost and the city will reimburse you. What a brilliant idea. There were some really great ideas in this thing that if we did them all and we accomplished them all, I think when we got done, we'd have this, and you even brought in the signage, the welcome signs, all the things that we've been talking about today that we didn't have on the plan over here. I think we would have this huge, big, shiny, redone Mill Creek that would be just freaking incredible. So a lot of the things I thought were really important were in here. I thought you've done a really great job. My compliments to the city. Yeah, we're not going to get everything we all want. Not everything I want's in there either. But you know what? I think you've really done a great job. If we could do these, I think we'd have an incredible impact on our city. So I support you and I support this plan. I compliment you all and the city for doing this. So good job.
And I will say, I really don't believe this is going to take all of our funding. So we're going to have quite a bit left. So if there is some kind of large purchase that you would like us to be looking into, that is something we can do. Or if you want to make a decision, 200,000 isn't enough for parks, maybe we want to give them a larger amount to just get the blood flowing, figure out what their different ideas are.
Yeah, something really big, like Councilman Cavalieri was saying, that would commemorate this and give back to the citizens.
I think that's why maybe a running total or some sort of idea of the dollar figure would have been helpful. So I thought that was going to be the ending, and say you now have $84.27 left.
I wish. I really, really wish. I cannot tell you, I would be so excited to have ARPA completely finalized.
Exhausted.
All right, if we can go to the next slide.
I think Mayor Pro Tem had a comment.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Deputy City Manager. I think, I'm not sure everyone realizes how much work you have put in to bringing us this list by really talking to everyone and finding out what the priorities were and being able to kind of coalesce that into some common themes and common ground for everyone and bring it to us. So thank you for all your hard work on this. And I'm very excited about some of these, and I think every single thing on here is needed. And I would just say that some of the things that popped out for me that I'm most excited about is first, bringing back the preschool pals. I think that's really important to me that we invest some money into making sure that we get that up and running again. It closed down because of COVID, and I think it was very popular in our community, and everyone would really appreciate having all those preschool programs back again. And also the streetscapes, because I mean, they're just in rough shape. So, as you're out running around through the community, you just start to see the weeds, the overgrowth, and it reflects in our city. So I think it's very important that we get out there and take care of those and make those look nice, because everyone's seeing them, and it reflects on us as a city. So those are two of the things that I'm extremely excited about. And also giving money to the Parks Board to work on things that they see. Hopefully, we can drop some hints about some new water fountains, because I think every park I go to, the water fountain doesn't work right, or yeah, good. It gets stuck on or whatever, and then the kids start playing in it, and then you've got water everywhere and a mess, and I'm sure staff has to come and clean it up. So hopefully that's on there. But yeah, and so I would just love to see that, and maybe along with what Councilmember Cavallari was saying, if we have something really nice to pump up at the end of the day too, then that would be nice. So I think those are the things I'm trying to go through here that I was most excited about on the list. I think there's some things on here that aren't necessarily exciting, but we really need as a city. And the whole idea of ARPA was to replace funds that we lost, that we would have had coming in during that time if nothing had happened. So to me, the purchase of laptops, it actually makes perfect sense, because I feel like not only would we have needed those, but we needed them because of COVID. So that to me makes perfect sense that that's what we're spending that on. And also the substation outfitting, I think that's a perfect use of ARPA funds to make sure we get that outfitted, and that gives something over there in that area of the city as well. So that's it. Thanks.
Councilmember Paddock.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. The one thing I'd like to add, I've heard a lot of great things, is there appetite to pull any of the capital programs forward with these dollars? The 35th crosswalk as an example, pulling that from 25 up, or other items of that ilk to put on the consideration set.
If anyone's interested.
I actually would like to do the 35th crosswalk with some of the ARPA funds, and I kept bringing it up, but
But
yeah,
let's not jump into ARPA funds. We have a pile of mitigation fees from the.
yeah,
farm
and
that
that's
we
what I'm
pay
saying.
for.
I'm aware that we have to wait for the mitigation fees and things like that. So that's why I didn't bring it up, because I'm aware that we need to wait for that study, and we do have some mitigation fees to go towards that. So
Do we have to wait for mitigation fees on the entrance to the city signage?
That
I'd
wouldn't-
love to see that one move
Those
forward.
fees couldn't be applied to that traffic mitigation fees, I don't think.
I'd love to see that one move forward in ARPA fees. The signage to the city, the entrance signs to the cities, let's really do that right. Can we get a mill? Can we get our own Mill Creek? Can we have a mill again? I want a mill.
Yeah, because I shared Councilmember Cavallari's comment that, it'd be nice to have one big thing you could point
That
to,
could be one of our big things, a big mill, a running mill.
but we still need all this.
And we want all that.
And
We want all that too,
reading
yeah.
this list, all I could think of since it's September and the playoff run is, this is a bunch of singles.
Yeah.
You know what? Rod Crew and Nitro are in the Hall of Fame. They hit nothing but singles.
That's right.
So I like the structure of what we've laid out here. I think and I do agree that I think there's gonna be money left over that we may be able to put towards that big shiny thing that we can't think about right now.
I think there's an opportunity to collaborate on a couple of them as well. Maybe we have the Arts Beautification Board participate in what the signage looks like, and et cetera. There could be some fun intersection. I don't want you.
Rookie.
Excuse me. I think there could be some interesting collaboration on some of these items, like it was brought up the entrance signs, and having this Arts and Beautification Board participate in what that might look like, and have a greater sense of ownership.
Like work, yeah. Like that.
Councilmember Allison.
Thank you, Mayor. I've noticed while walking along the Bothell Everett Highway, it's those center sections of landscape that are just horrible, but there's garbage along the sidewalks on both sides and just overgrown weeds. So, let's not forget about the sidewalks, especially along that Buffalo River Highway. I mean, it's just bound to happen, right? People throw stuff out of their car, it piles up, the road's clean, and then the landscaping and all the overgrowth and the sidewalks are piling up with garbage. Thanks.
So what do you need from us
So-
besides what you've heard?
So as we move into,
He's blessing, he's
oh,
blessing.
okay. So as we move into phase 2 discussion, it's mainly what kind of funding, if you support the parks idea of giving them some kind of a funding number, it doesn't have to be official yet, just an idea. What would that funding potentially look like? And the same thing for the Arts and Beautification Board. And then maybe some guidance on the grant program. And if you support that, is the 50-50, is a 50,000 maximum too much? On the cleanup or on the community preservation, is 100,000 enough? Or do you think that's too much? So I mainly just need a little bit of feedback so that I can go to, if you would like, so I can go to the boards and say, hey, this is an amount we are discussing. We would like to get your feedback and your recommendations. And then we can bring those to the city manager and we'll work through ARPA.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks, Mayor. So for the 50-50 reimbursement, it's our contention to maybe go to the business association or some of the businesses and say, hey, listen, it's looking dilapidated around here. Here's an opportunity for you to put that new awning, like you said, and we'll reimburse 50% and get that ahead of time. I really like that idea. I think that's a great use of public funds to allow them to have an opportunity to fix something they probably don't have the money for. So is that all businesses though, right? Like, I just want to make sure that it's not just town center. It's all the businesses to and from the northeast corner to the very far south. So I like that. I think that's a really good idea. And as far as dollar figure for the parks, I'm not sure yet. I think a couple 100,000 is fair. See what that looks like. I think there's a couple of projects that's been kicked around a little bit. So I think that would be fun. I think that's great inclusion in the process and people would appreciate that.
Councilmember Duque.
I think it should be for the Parks Board, and I would assume then for Arts and Beautification Board, but they're brainstorming to then be able to scope or to put numbers next to things. At least for Parks Board, I know they have projects that they are working on and want to present to City Council. So giving, being able to then say, let's move forward with finding out what those costs are and the not necessarily the feasibility, because now we're saying that there's funding, starting with that instead of just picking a number, I think would be helpful in terms of those projects, like more of what are you just brainstorm and then come back to us and looking at it that way instead of telling them this is how much money you have as the initial step. I would feel more comfortable with.
Do you want maybe some guidance on a few different amounts then?
Mhm.
Maybe 200,000, 500,000? I mean, that's a very large amount. So that's why I mainly don't want them. I don't want to give them a huge amount if we don't plan on actually.
I like the
executing
fixed
on
dollar
that.
figure. I think that really puts the parameters in place.
Yeah, I think we need to give them a little bit of parameters or else they'll spend like $3 million.
It's, I guess, and
Well,
then.
they're not spending anything.
I know, they'll come to us be like,
Yeah.
we want this thing.
Well, and then
for
just to
$3 million.
finish my thought on that, it's more of, the question is, so again, because I have insider knowledge, because I've attended a couple of Parks and Rec Board meetings, they have projects in mind and the next step is to find out how much they have ideas, they have concepts. If you follow Frank and Mike's scoping, concept scope, they've concepted a lot. Like they I don't know if they can concept more on what, but now they need a scope. So they wouldn't know how much those things were. So if it is putting a dollar amount so that they can look at it and then go, oh no, that wouldn't work. I'm comfortable with a fixed number and but I'm just saying they're ready for someone then to actually do that that scoping part. And so I assume then with the scoping part, it has to go back to staff. Because you don't want, they're part of the concept and brainstorm, but you don't have them doing the negotiations or the pricing out for how much this particular type of water fountain equipment comes in, or the adult fitness that they're talking about, fitness, those pieces. That's what I guess they may not be the ones to know what the numbers are. And so we need to provide that guidance.
So I think saying we're gonna look at potentially a number around 200,000, say they come back and they need 205,000.
I think there's a few others that still want to comment before we get to resolution. John?
Yeah, I think a set dollar amount, I understand people's thoughts on this, but these boards, I think we should, a better way to, a suggested way to look at it, suggested, not a better, a recommend, another way to look at it would be maybe more from a grant standpoint. We've got these monies available and it's available to the parks, it's available to arts and beautification. They may want to come back. I think this is where you were going, Councilmember Decay. They may want to come back and ask for approval for 25,000 to bring in a consultant to help them flesh out the project, a designer on what exactly it would look like and what it would cost before they could come back and present a more complete dollar amount. And they have no idea, the boards, of exactly to come back and say it's going to cost you 200,000 or 180,000, or they're going to need steps on this. And so I think if we had the city has these dollar amounts available to parks and to arts and beautification, and we you're welcome to come forward and present and ask for these grants, and maybe in steps. Maybe the first step is a consultant step where you'd like to get some monies to take it to a more of a fleshed out concrete amount that you can come back and ask for a secondary amount. I think it might be a better approach. And actually on the same idea with the 50-50 dollar amount, following your guidelines, this co-op money is for certain items, very clear guidelines, very clear guidelines. This is all we're covering. That's eligible for the co-op money. I like if we made 50,000 available, that's $100,000 worth of upgrades. That could go pretty darn quick. I think we're probably looking at more like $100,000 worth of upgrades. That'd be $200,000 worth of upgrades to our businesses. And if we made the guidelines very clear that it's awnings and signage and paint, the things we want to are very visible and very clearly enhancing the image of Mill Creek, I think that'd be a wise investment. Yeah, aesthetics. Yeah. So I think starting with 100,000, we can always, if we blow through that in a month, we can always come back and add another 100,000 to it. But I think 100,000 would be the minimum I would recommend on the 50-50. The other one, I got a little confused because I'm not as bright as everybody, but the other one kind of confused me. The co-op one was very clear and I really liked that one, but the preservation one, I wasn't quite as clear as how that would work. I'd probably need a little more fleshing. We don't have to go into it right now, but I did really like moving ahead on your 50-50 at 100 and doing maybe a 200 and 200 allocation on the arts and then maybe they could even start working ahead on the signage projects and such.
Okay. I think I mainly.
I haven't got a chance to talk yet. On the guidelines, the thing that's important to me for the 50-50 is we have to have 100% participation by the businesses in any given development. It's not going to do us any good if half the businesses in town center say I'm in and the other half don't. So the guidelines on how it's implemented, I think, are going to be very important. As I've said during DRCC, I'm not in favor of putting numbers next to things because that's going to just stunt creativity. If the Parks Board has ideas, let's get them in front of us in the next 6 weeks and hear what they are to see if they're anything that we'd be pursuing. And then let's go from there. The A&B Board, come on, folks, we're all adults. Let's say within reason, we have some money. You can't spend 5.8. You're probably not going to spend $500,000, but if you have ideas, bring them to us. So I'm not in favor of putting any caps. I think we have some adults in the room on those boards that can know within reason that if we go to them, they're not going to have 5.8 million or now 5.5 million to spend. So I don't know. I'm just not big on setting caps because I think it's going to stifle their ideas. Because what if we have 200,000, but this is going to cost us 205. So That's just where one of the
exciting.
seven's at.
Nice, that's-
One more thing.
Just
I'm
one
joking.
more clarifying
Everyone
question.
keeps saying I got one more thing. I don't have a report, but
And this isn't for me, but, so when you said the additional funds for, properties that have had, a whole bunch of garbage and a whole bunch of nonsense dumped on it, is the problem, is it that acute that we're having to put aside hundreds of thousands of dollars to go do cleanup on people's property?
So there are some public nuisances that could potentially endanger public health. That I would recommend a grant that would help these business owners and property owners get this cleaned up.
Okay, do you have an example, Laurel?
I'll give you one that you may have seen. So on the north end of town on 527, right next to the swamp, just west of that, if you look back in through there, there's been a place where fires have been lit and a lot of stuff in there, and that's probably $10,000 plus to clean that up. So I'm just guessing, but there's a lot of stuff over several years that is hazardous stuff. So we're just guessing. If that's $10,000, maybe you need 100,000 total. If you can kind of picture that, and it's pure guess, we don't know. And I'll tell you, the trick is if we do it, we get to do it prevailing wage. If other people do it, it comes at a different price. Remember, there are always, all these things, remember that when people are dreaming about stuff, it costs a lot more for government to do it. So be careful when you dream about stuff. And so that's some of our ideas behind this 50-50 was if somebody goes and buys a new awning and has it installed privately, and we pay them some money back, and we think that's legit under ARPA, that's probably a better approach than us buying the awning and putting it up for them. That's a silly example, but that's the trick on a lot of this. We're trying to think about how we make this a good use of the public funds that helps businesses or helps property owners with problems that may or may not have been theirs, or things they would do that would help enhance our community.
And we avoid the liability of if we're the ones that hire a cleaner and something maybe was missed, we don't take on that liability.
On that basis, then I'd say it's a good use of these funds. Then I think it's probably an important use of these funds at this point. Thanks. Thanks,
I agree.
Director Todd.
Right. I would say I have what I need then. I'm excited to tell both boards that they have.
come to us with your
right now.
ideas.
And then we will move on probably, I'm thinking late October. We'll come back with estimates from the boards and for our items as well. And then we can look at potentially passing some kind of a ordinance to start spending money. All right, thank you.
Thank you for all your work on it.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda. Item A. Approval of checks number 65128 through 65210 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $1,446,071.09. Audit committee was Councilmember Stecker and Councilmember Cavallari. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions.
And payroll, item B, payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $270,020.86. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions.
And City of Council regular meeting minutes of September 13th, 2022. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved 7-0. Staff reports. Director Todd.
We went too many hours and my battery is dead on my laptop. It's very old. So you bring the slides up. I want to give you a quick update. I'll speak quickly, an update on where we're at with fire transitions overall. So this is about, next slide. So kind of a status update. So the first main thing is a service transfer. The process is in process. Remember, our objective is a seamless transfer to the community. Ideally, when you call for 911, you shouldn't know when we've switched from Surfer to South County Fires. That everybody's keeping that tantamount in what they're doing. Right now, we're shooting for early to mid-December. Officially, we talked about the end of December, but doing this transfer on New Year's Eve was nobody's favorite idea. So the two agencies right now, they're working on what's called an ICS plan, a very incident command structure approach, very structured approach to it. South County Fire and Surfer have had a couple of meetings. They had another meeting today. They're making progress on that. So we're leaving it up to them to figure out how you transfer one agency to the others. That's going smoothly. The station purchase, we've got some inspections coming up. We're going to order an environmental review of the building. Hopefully there's nothing there. There's probably no underground storage tanks. There was never a dry cleaner on that site, but you're required to do that as part of our conditions for purchasing that property. Building condition, actually South County Fire is going to take that on because their interest is not about the dings in the woodwork, but their interest is what do they need long-term when it becomes their building? What do they need to plan for? So they're going to do that inspection. And the stormwater pond has been neglected. It's one of those that people have not taken very good care of. So Frank and I are going to go figure out how to climb over the fence or break into the fence and decide how many trees and bushes and blackberry vines need to come out of there. And we'll get that resolved before they transfer the property. The real estate closing will happen coincident with the service transfer. It kind of makes it cleaner to say who's owning the building that time. So we'll get those documents lined up. So the day they transfer service, we'll have a closing happen in virtual fashion. And remember, we are going to be paying for the station. It's 1.16, I believe is the number, million, but it's over 20 years, no interest. That's a good deal. But you'll see that as a new item in your budget that you're going to see in the future, about $60,000 a year. Next slide. Equipment. One of the things they're supposed to give us was a list of personal equipment, and personal equipment means things like the beds and the washer dryer and the Barcalounger and the TV set on the wall. The idea is, again, with a smooth transition, one set of guys walks out, guys and gals walks out, and the other ones move in, and they didn't have to go to IKEA and buy a bunch of stuff. So we finally got that list. Took some time. We got that list, and South County Fire now has that. Excuse me, I should say SCF. They have that in their hands and they're looking at it to decide what do they need to do to equip. In particular, their whole intention is to move in with minimal changes. When you move in, you're just ready to go to work without having to worry. You bring your own kit of toothbrush and your clothes, your change of clothes, but you should be ready to go. One couple of big things, and they're going to have a meeting and do a walkthrough in a couple of weeks. A little bit different radio dispatch systems involved, and they've got to get their own IT. So they're going to go through there, see where that's going to be put in place. They'll probably have to run both systems in parallel for a little while. So again, when the switchover happens, when you call 911, still the units get dispatched properly. Apparatus, South County Fire has a medic unit that they're planning on using. And I'll just say the engine is under discussion. We're still working on that. There will be an engine, but there's still some discussion about how that's going to happen. Fire marshal agreement, we've talked about that before. That's yet to be completed. It's wrapped up in the South County Fire budgeting process. They're trying to figure out what their labor costs are going to be. But remember, what's going on here is that in the past, our fire marshal services were provided as part of our contract with with Surfer. Now we're going to be paying for those ourselves. We will look at our fees, and hopefully our fees will be commensurate with some of those things we're going to have to pay. But in the case of cities, so we are as a city in South County Fire, and Linwood is a city in South County Fire. So we have contracts for fire marshal services, fire marshal and fire inspections, where we pay for that service. The people in unincorporated areas use the county fire marshal. And so that's why that's different than it has been in our existing agreement. It's a little bit funny, but if you're asking about why we've got a fire marshal agreement and the people across the street that are not in City of Mill Creek, that's why. Next slide. So governance, I've been participating since August 1st in their meetings, and they have created what's called a non-voting board member or a liaison that's been added into their bylaws. Their bylaws they harken back to when they first created the RFA. So it talks about Linwood and Fire District 1 coming together, and it had it set up for how those initial council members from Linwood, 2 from Linwood, and then 5 others got put on their commission and how they started rolling out. You look at their bylaws, there's a lot of things that need to get updated. So they've got a process going on where this fall, they're going to be updating the bylaws comprehensively, but they did add in this position so that I can sit there and make comments. I can't make motions. I can't second motions. I don't get to vote, but people are listening. So we are represented at these meetings by me as that liaison. The redistricting is a big deal for us. But I'm not sure exactly how we want to go at this. The redistricting process is basically you want all the 5 districts now have to be bigger because adding 21,000 people from Mill Creek means they all need to get bigger. So they've got a guy who's really good with GIS and a lot of numbers, trying to figure out how to keep them equal and make them regular boundaries. We're now on version 4 on how that works. It's partly you're trying to avoid little dog legs for somebody who lives here. Sitting commissioner sits here, but the line should be there. So they've got a lot of different approaches. First version had Mill Creek touching parts of 3 of the 5 different districts. Another version had 2, another version had 2 a different way. Somebody proposed, how about having Mill Creek all in one? And that doesn't work very well. Bottom line is they're still working on it. That is important to us. I'll come back to that in a second in terms of how our voters get to vote in the next election. But anyway, that's in progress, and their budget is in progress. And I'll tell you, trying to catch up to speed, listen to their budget process and try to do our budget process. My brain is just too full of numbers and I'm just so confused. Overall, they were able to settle their contract. They had a contract that was not ratified. They got a 5-year contract, but it actually goes back a little bit. So they've got a contract, but it's got a pretty healthy inflator. They were quite a ways behind in terms of labor costs. They've now got a very good contract, got some good things out of it. It was a good resolution, but it means that their costs are going up. But on the other side of their costs going up, they now have Mill Creek as extra revenue with certain costs. And the other contract cities are in annexation discussions. Is the bullet I put up there. Well, Breyer voted tonight to go to the ballot to annex into South County Fire. They are under contract now, as is Montlake Terrace and as Edmonds. Both Breyer and Montlake Terrace, their contracts expire at the end of 2024. But Breyer has decided to go to the next ballot, which I'm not sure when that would be this fall. I guess it'd probably be the August one. Anyway, they're going to try to do what we did in a short period of time and get this off of their books and become a member of the fire district directly. And that's the regional fire authority directly. That's good for us because right now they've got a contract like we had where they're getting a bargain because it was a 20-year-old contract and had 20-year-old rates in it. So this is good for us now that we've joined. This is going to help figure out to make it fair so everybody within the RFA is paying the same amount. Montlake Terrace is also talking about it. They're just not quite as far along, but that's something that their board is working quite a bit on. And I'm just put the comment there is Mill Creek liaison tapers off in 2023 after the service transition. I'm really trying to pay attention until we get the service transition done, until we get the station purchased. That's Mill Creek's business, Mill Creek staff business. I still think there's a duty for us to make sure that our wishes of our citizen are reflected until we have a chance to get to the vote. But I'm intending to taper off because two sets of meetings like this on a Tuesday night at the same time. That's why you see me watching both screens sometimes. Next slide. So how does this work? How's our relationship change in 2023? Well, the voters will participate in the fall 2023 elections. And the way it is written is, the way their bylaws are set up is that the ones that are up in 2023 is for District 2, 4, and they have 2 different at-large positions. Out of the 7, there's 5 districts and 2 at-large. They are short and full terms coming up at 2023. All 3 of those spots were appointed, so they are all going to be up. The 2, 4, and at-large are going to be up at the next election. So somebody could run in the primary, and somebody could run, and then the primary will happen, and people will run in the general. During the primary election, people only vote for people in their district. So everybody would get to vote for the at-large person, but if we don't end up in District 2 or 4, we wouldn't vote on whoever the candidates would be in 2 and 4 because they are not coming from our district. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. But then in the general election, everybody votes on everybody. So it really is a districted thing. I think they're trying to make sure that with 200,000 people in the area, you don't get everybody all in one place. I think that's their intent. So I'm watching carefully and not chiming in too much on the redistricting because they're fighting over who's got which turf, trying not to gerrymander things, but I am making sure that in the process that we do have an opportunity for people in Mill Creek to participate. If we ended up with a redistricting where they didn't have one of the districts touching Mill Creek that's up in 2023, then nobody from Mill Creek could run for an election other than in that at-large position before 2025. Does that kind of make sense? So somebody's dying to be on the fire board for South County Fire and they live in Mill Creek, unless we're in 2 or 4, you couldn't run for that, you could run for that large spot. Does that kind of make sense? So I think we're kind of covered, but that's where we're trying to watch how that works out. That liaison role sunsets when the election is certified. So the moment it's certified, since all those folks were appointed, somebody new will be it. And so I will be done and that will go out and we'll no longer have a spot on their board, a non-voting spot on the board. But the other contract cities are going to have similar things. So if Briar has an annexation, if they do annex, then they'd have a non-voting liaison until the same thing happens. Again, a redistricting, fight over the lines again, shuffle things out there. Since we're coming in fairly early on, this is going to be good, but you're going to see over a period of time, those districts will change. At first Briar, 8,000 people in Briar? And then Montlake Terrace is about 20,000. So that's going to change the demographics again. Long-term connection between South County Fire and City of Mill Creek is undefined. There is no real reason for us to participate necessarily. If you look what happened with Linwood as a council doesn't participate demonstrably in the South County Fire Board. Doesn't mean they're not welcome, but have found that over time, their representation through the regular voting process works out pretty well. So it's undefined, but we can choose what to do with that. Next slide. So we're officially in South County Fire as of August 1st. So we're involved and they would like to be involved in our outreach and education events in Mill Creek community. There's Fire Prevention Week is going to be October 9th through the 15th. And here's the announcement. We'll help them put it out through social media, but there's an open house for Fire Prevention Week at the Martha Lake Station, which is just up the street on October 15th. So that'd be a chance for the kids to go see the hoses and see the fire trucks. And fortunately, it's kind of close to us. So our marketing communication people will get that word out. Put down Veterans Parade, and we'd love to have our new guys in the parade, but we'll have to see who's willing to put an engine in the parade, depending on who's got to stay close to home. But we want to have somebody, we want to have a fire truck in the parade, right? So we're going to figure this out somehow. Yeah, we could have 2 fire engines there. We'll have fire engine races or something.
Better than your fire engine.
But I just want to point out that South County Fire has known us for a long time through mutual aid. They've often been the guys who showed up first or showed up second. So mutual aid, they know Mill Creek. Same thing. After we've changed the transition of service, Surfer will still be here in our community. So through mutual aid, everybody wants to stay friendly because we do depend on that second unit in many cases or who's closest. So if Station 72 is closer, they're coming instead of Station 76. And so it doesn't really matter. So we're going to have that same relationship continuing forward. Next slide. But it's time to meet our partners. We talked about this early on. We said we wait till after August 1st. They're proposing October 19th, pretty soon here, to have a meet and greet with the commissioners, the counselors, the council members, the leadership teams. I have it over at the South County Fire Headquarters, which is over South Everett, over by Mariner High School, if you know where that is. Chance to meet the people, see some of the equipment and learn about some programs. They've got some exciting things. The community resource paramedic is CRP. ACT is antidote, compression, and tourniquet, which instead of going to a 4-hour first aid class, which not very many people go to, you go to this 45-minute class and you learn about the things that you really need to do for life saving. How do you give Narcan? How do you put a tourniquet on before somebody bleeds out? Or how do you give compression style CPR? And so they've been very successful at it. It's kind of a unique thing. They'd love to show us some of that stuff. Talking to them today, they're talking about doing National Night Out by South County Fire for this group of folks. And it's gonna be kind of exciting. Leslie Hines over there is pretty exciting. And Scott and Jody kind of compete for who can put on the best party. She's thinking she's going to win this one. So we'll see what happens, but put that on your calendar. We're talking about 5 to 7-ish. I guess I'm looking if there are any big conflicts people have. We can't really accommodate everybody, but if we do it 5 to 7, kind of get people to get off work a little bit early and do it. If you come late, that's okay. If you have to leave early, that's okay. We're trying to make it so it's not too late. Does that sound generally like a good idea?
Yeah, I just have to be back here at 7.
What's on at 7? Do we have
I have an appointment that night.
you have an appointment? Okay. It's not like a city event though. Okay.
No.
So
But
anyway,
but it's okay if we can't attend, right?
yeah,
That's
you don't
okay.
have to.
It's
go.
my son's birthday.
Oh,
That's
well,
the only, no, and
Yeah.
it's okay, but I'm,
Yeah.
No, this is
I just
just a
wanted to
chance. We've met them on paper. We've talked to them a lot, but other than Thad Hovis coming over here and answering some questions when we had 4 people that wanted to do a public meeting, they haven't really come and talked to folks because they tried to respect the fact that this is a little bit uncomfortable in some ways. So this is our chance to kind of roll out the chance for them to roll the red carpet. Next slide. I think I'm done. Yeah, I am. Thanks. Any questions?
Nice job, Mike.
Thanks.
And she's back.
Try to make this fairly quick. All right, Asa, can you bring up the financial reports? I think we're gonna need those a little bit bigger.
I can't
I
see
can't
it.
make that out.
I can't. That's city engineer size.
Oh, now I can see it.
Okay, I can't quite make that out, but if you guys can, that's all that matters.
I can see it.
My eyes
Okay.
reading the book.
I
Okay,
can see it.
all right. So overall, general fund looks great. If you notice, the regular and EMS property tax is not at, so we are 83.3% through this budget. So that's essentially where you are expecting to see revenues and expenses. So we do have our main property tax payments come in May and November. So I am not concerned about where our property taxes are right now. We are right on target. Sales tax right now is slowing down right now. So the funding we got in August was technically money spent in June. So I am expecting sales tax to slow down quite a bit, but we are slightly over budget right now, so we should land just about perfectly. Can you jump to the next to last page? Just so you can glance at sales tax.
26.
It'll be I think it's the next page. It'll be the next to last. Yeah, there we go. So we're at roughly 68% for the annual amount, where in 2021, we were about 70%. We had 70% of our sales tax collected at this time last year. So right now our construction has come down and so has our retail trade. Those are the two biggest ones that I had noticed. From there, charges for service overall, can we jump back to that first page? All right, so charges for service, we are still under budget, so recreation still is down. I will say passports are doing great. They are way over budget. Great news. August was the highest revenue month we've had since COVID and second to highest to date. I will say that September and October are typically slower, so don't expect September and October to be quite as great. Then the holiday travelers pick back up, so we will expect November to be a little bit better. From there, IT, again, we are over 11.5% related to COVID. Police budgets do show that they are really quite a bit under budget. I did want to point out, we have not closed that CVA, so we do have retro pay changes that will be going into effect from January 1 of 2022 all the way through the end of the year. So it looks like we have more padding than we do. So don't get too comfortable with that one. And then the other number I wanted to point out was Public Works. We are slightly over budget. I don't see us needing a budget amendment for this, and a lot of it is those one-time replacement costs. So don't have any concern there. On the next page, the only other, I think I'm just going to point out two numbers, then I'll take questions. On city streets, we're at 94.4%. We're going to try not to need any kind of budget amendment here. This is one that I'm not 100% sure. We may end up needing one. We'll see. Gas prices are much higher than they used to be. And then the other number was just the REIT tax on page 3. We are 40% over budget. So COVID has been absolutely crazy. The
tax rate change that went into effect. I do believe that has to do with this partially. Just because they went to a graduated scale. But overall, I never in a million years thought we were gonna get this great of REAP revenue. So, does anyone have any questions? No? All right.
Thank you.
Financials look good.
All right, the next report, I have just one quick comment. All of you remember on September 6th, you approved the retention incentive. The deputy city manager and I had the opportunity to hand deliver ARPA letters to each employee. I think we all but about 5 or 6. I just wanted to, it was a great experience with each employee, just acknowledging their hard work. Many since March 11th of 2020. Many started recently. They were all appreciative of this incentive. I just want to transfer the thank you from them to all of you for all of your support. So there is a change in the morale a little bit. And so I think we're moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Is that it for your reports?
That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got 4, I think, relatively quick things. The coffee chat was a big hit. I thought I don't know, increased our attendance by 600%, something like that. But I guess that's what happens when you have a captive audience. But thanks to Jody and Scott for all their effort to put that on. We are working on putting together a schedule for the coming year. Just, to hit some different locations, different times, and see if we can keep the attendance up. To your question about the library, I had a conversation with Councilmember Mead and we talked about the money that is available now and will be available. And Martin and Mike are going to be working on coming back to us with some ideas on what we can do. But I had that discussion with Jared. Retreat, remember we all set aside the dates for the last 2 meetings. We'll have a special meeting the 3rd week and a regular meeting the 4th week. We have confirmed that Andrew Ballard is available to be our facilitator again. So he's on board and all lined up. So Martin, Andrew, Stephanie and I will be working on putting together a draft agenda to come back to you guys with in the coming 4 to 6 weeks so we can finalize it. But we're starting to think about what we want to talk about and accomplish. So whatever the 3rd and 4th Tuesdays of January are. And then lastly, I would like to suggest we get a committee going. I think I know 2 volunteers already. We need to get going with our legislative agenda. There's 3 things we need to decide. Do we want to hire a lobbyist? If so, who? And then what would our legislative agenda be? I have a list of preliminary contacts of people I know that I've had some very preliminary discussions with. If we wanted to hire someone, we might be looking at $5,000 a month. I don't have a full understanding of what all they could do for us, but that's where I'm suggesting we get a committee of 3 of us to dive into this. And I know the mayor pro tem is interested in this. I believe Councilmember Steckler is interested in this. So if there is a 3rd that has any free time, Councilmember Allison, I think we have our committee. So I will dub the mayor pro tem the chair of the legislative committee and let her take it and run with it from here. And that's, I had other things, but they can wait for another week. So Mayor Pro Tem, your report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just have a few things since it's getting so late. Do you want to say the city chat was really, really nice, and it was really fun and I guess informative to see that even over at Cogier, they are also talking a lot about the same things that we heard when we were out doorbelling last year. So it was kind of reaffirming that we have similar concerns regardless of where you live in the city. So I thought that was really, really informative. Also, I'm continuing my work with the health board transition. Every single week I feel Director Todd because I'm on the budget committee. And so meeting every week, so I'm looking at their budget while we're looking at our budget. And I know one of the things we had discussed back when the discussion first came to bear in regards to the transition was that they're going to have to decide what to do with the with the building because the cities had invested interest in the building from the startup. So I believe there will probably at some point be something coming to us regarding that. So just want everyone to be aware of that. And I also want to remind everyone that the Economic Alliance of Snohomish County has a program going on October 6th for council members. I strongly recommend that everyone goes. I think Councilmember Duque is interested as well, and I'm signed up. It's really important. I think that every single one of us are go and represent our city and find out what's going on and have our voices heard at that meeting. And that's it, because you discussed the legislative agenda. So no more.
Councilmember Steckler, any report?
No report.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Real fast, Mayor, just a shout out. What the press calls the Mill Creek High School. What they meant was the group at Jackson, Mariner and Archbishop. Their advanced robotics team placed second in a world competition this past week overall. And congratulations to them. Fantastic group of young people. Kudos. That's it.
Councilmember Allison, any report?
No report.
Councilmember Duque?
No report.
Councilmember Paddock?
No report.
With that, audience communication, would anyone like to address the council tonight? I'm seeing heads shake negatively. Okay. Then the council is going to adjourn to recess to executive session to discuss potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 I. And no action will be taken at the end, I believe. We need 10 minutes. Then we will be in executive session till 9:30.
Yes.
I know, I'm freezing too. Cam and I used to always freeze to death with the air conditioning.
Okay, is Isa there? Hello, hello. There you are. Okay, the council is adjourned as an executive session at 9:29. No action is being taken. So there's no objection. I'll adjourn the meeting. Remind everyone to tip back your favorite beverage on Friday night to celebrate the city's birthday.
And yours.
And
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Asa.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Asa.
Good night.